Hello and welcome to Chinese Novel Audiobook. Explore our playlist for more captivating novels, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new audiobook. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1 Hometown. The sun was setting, and the orange light was gradually fading. After a while, the faint light disappeared completely, leaving only the pale bright moon in the sky and the little lights on the island. In a single-story single-family stone house near the main entrance, in the Lap Wizard Collar on the hillside on the south side of the island. Apprentices are in class. This is a spacious stone house, with low wooden tables made of 10 long logs placed neatly on the wood-grained floor. There is also a large pebbled decorative fireplace at the front, and a tall brown lectern. The teacher in front of the desk was a middle-aged man with long beards and wearing a gray wizard robe, and he was speaking in a leisurely manner. The essence of a wizard's advancement is the continuous growth and sublimation of the spirit. More than 40 apprentices were sitting loosely under the desk, listening to the class carefully. They were male and female, all sitting on the fur cushions they brought, and wearing wizard robes of the same style as the teachers. It's just that the teachers is more delicate, and the triangular badge on the chest is also different in color from their black iron, it is shiny golden yellow. It's almost time. After a while, the bearded teacher finished speaking. He looked at his pocket watch and announced neatly, "Get out of class is over." Then he closed the thick black book in his hand, tucked it under his arm, and walked towards the door. But soon, he seemed to remember something again, stopped, looked back at the apprentices, paused and said, "In the next 3 months, there will be no monthly lessons, and the daily tasks will be the same. I suggest you make plans as early as possible." As soon as he finished speaking, he left without delay, and with a wave of his left hand, he extinguished the bright crystals hanging from the brown ceiling. The soft white light suddenly disappeared, and the cold moonlight quietly broke in from the window, adding a little gleam to the dark room. But Mingyu was in vain, and the room was still dark. In the silence, there were only the rustling sounds of packing things and faint sighs. "Friends." A half-grown young man with long hair suddenly broke the silence, and he snapped his fingers. Flames suddenly burst out from the tip of his right index finger. With the faint firelight, he slowly stood up and looked around at the apprentices. Among the apprentices, some turned a deaf ear, some laughed, but more people looked at him. "Nearly 10 years ago, we were brought to this island by Wizard Lap on a giant ship together," the long-haired young man said slowly. After scanning around, he looked at a petite blonde girl and said, "Erica, you just turned 6 years old that year, and you were the youngest among us." The girl seemed a little introverted. After being watched by everyone, she smiled shyly. The long-haired young man also smiled at her, turned his head and pointed at himself and said, "I was 10 years old, and I happen to be the oldest among us." Then he changed his voice, "However, even the oldest me, I have nearly 10 years of my life, half of which I live with everyone. We take classes together and learn witchcraft together. Although we are not related by blood, our relationship with each other." At this time, a boy with brown curly hair and slightly dark skin on the right back suddenly sneered, then rolled up his cushion, got up and left on his own. The long-haired young man paused, then continued as if he hadn't seen it. "But the relationship between each other is better than brothers and sisters. It's been the last 3 months. Everyone here should be like me. They don't have much hope of advancing." Although the long-haired youth seemed unaffected, he continued to speak passionately. But the brown-haired boy started, and then more than a dozen people left one after another. Colin was also in the mix. He quietly walked out of the cabin, carrying a backpack, and stood outside rubbing his head that had been hurting all day. The memory in his mind was still chaotic, he just wanted to go back to the stone house where the original owner lived, and sort out his memory. In fact, if not for the severe punishment for not coming to class, he would not have left the stone house even half a step today. Colin. Just as he had clearly identified the direction and was about to leave quickly, a crisp female voice from behind called him. Colin turned back calmly, and saw a beautiful girl with blonde hair and green eyes. Her silky blonde short hair just reached her chin, slightly fluffy, and her fair face was embedded with green eyes like amber. Memories were intertwined in his mind, and Colin recognized her by relying on the address of the young man with a cut head he just heard in the room, and some fragments of the memory of the original owner. "Erica." He imitated the original owner's tone and responded. Erica nodded as she walked towards Colin, frowning slightly, as if she was thinking about something. Let's go. After walking beside Colin, she said softly. Then continued to move forward. After walking for a few seconds, she turned back to Colin and asked suspiciously, "Why are you still there?" "Here we come." Colin smiled awkwardly and followed Erica. Erica didn't notice anything strange. Seeing him following, she continued to think about things. The two walked side by side on the gravel road. Colin's expression was calm and dull, but his heart was constantly thinking. Erica, what is the relationship between the original owner and her? Why did you walk with him without talking? Could it be your girlfriend? But according to the traces of the original owner's home, he is obviously just a single dog. Although it has been almost a day since he traveled here, his memory is still a little confused, and it seems that he still needs some time to receive and sort it out. For the girl in front of him, he could only think of one name. Colin felt a little irritable, and stroked his throbbing head with his hands. To avoid revealing his secrets, he remained silent, waiting for Erica to speak first. The two continued to walk on the gravel road in silence. Although there were no street lights or flashlights along the way, the moonlight was clear enough for people to see everything in front of them clearly. Such a scene reminded Colin of the nights in the countryside when he was a child in his previous life, when the moonlight was so bright. That's right, when the moon is clear at night, you can see things clearly without lights. He actually forgot. Hometown now seems as far away as childhood. Colin, how do you plan? Erica asked suddenly. Intend? What plan? The homesickness was suddenly interrupted, and Colin was startled when he heard it clearly. He pondered for a moment, then said calmly and vaguely, I plan, how else can I plan, it's still the same. Erica nodded, as if she understood something, and turned to other topics. I don't know how many people can get together after Charlie's speech. But you are right, the weak are still weak when they get together. I don't like them either. It's not so easy to mess around in the gathering place outside. After stroking the broken hair by her ear, she was silent for a moment, then continued, I plan to go to the dark forest. Dark forest. Single quote. Colin was taken aback, and the few memories in his mind happened to have relevant information. The dark forest is a dark forest full of opportunities but extremely dangerous on the north side of the entire wizard gathering place. Junior wizard apprentices go there, just to die. He didn't answer. But Erica suddenly asked, Colin, you have a way to advance, right? You've been staying behind closed doors lately. Colin was silent, his heart trembling. He can't remember anything. But Erica glanced at him who was silent, smiled forcedly, and continued, don't worry, your secret is yours. Wizard, who doesn't have a secret? I'm not interested in it. I want to talk to someone. Do you remember Ryan? After a pause, she continued. Either because of hearing the word, Lane, from Erica's mouth, or maybe the memory has already received the end. The chaotic memory in Colin's mind, like a jigsaw puzzle just unpacked, gradually began to sort out and piece together a complete memory. Remember, Colin said slowly after a while, his voice was inexplicably difficult, that's our hometown. He gradually remembered. Chapter 2 The Secret. The cold moonlight shines. On the gravel road, boys and girls walked side by side, dark shadows swaying behind them. Yeah, our hometown. Erica felt a little emotional. Almost 10 years ago, in Ryan, the capital of the Holy Flame Kingdom, she and Colin detected the talent of wizards, and then together with qualified children from other cities and countries, they were brought to this island by the mysterious and powerful rap wizard. 10 years, just passed. I really don't know if there is a chance to go back again. Erica looked up at the white full moon, her golden hair slipped from her young and fair face, and hung softly behind her head. Quote. There is a chance. Colin responded in a low voice, his face was a little pale, and he was trying to digest his memory. Erica forced a smile when she heard this, she only thought that Colin was comforting her. There are too many innumerable dangers at sea, and there is no way to return to Ryan without becoming an official wizard. Do you miss Ryan, Colin? She looked at Yuan Yu and continued to ask. I miss you. Colin nodded slightly and exhaled lightly. He finally recovered and his head no longer hurts. He raised his head and looked at the moon that was very similar to his previous life, and added. I miss you very much. 10 years ago, the original owner was a little over 7 years old and was born in a middle-class family. He had a pair of loving parents and a 2-year-old younger sister. In memory, the original owner, like Erica, has always missed Ryan very much. And he also missed the Earth. Although it's only been a short time, the feeling of homesickness is much stronger than when traveling far away on Earth. The gravel road under my feet, the black stone buildings beside me, the specious full moon in the sky, everything is strange. He clearly realizes that the current him is separated by countless parallel universes. As for Erica and the original owner, there is actually no special relationship, and they didn't even know each other when they were in Ryan. It's just that later, because they all came from Ryan, they had a natural sense of closeness in their identities, and they lived in the adjacent stone house led by the wizard, so now they can be regarded as familiar good friends. Erica came to look for him, and it was the stone house where they went back to live together. Colin, if possible, I would like to ask you one thing. Erica withdrew her gaze from the moon and turned to Colin. The blonde hair beside her ears slid with gravity, covering her small ears again. If you can become an official wizard and return to Ryan, I hope you can greet my parents for me. Facing Erica's expectant gaze, Colin's lips moved slightly, as if he wanted to explain something, but in the end he just nodded. The two walked for a while, and Colin said, "Dark forest, it's too dangerous. Even if you can't advance after 3 months, you're just going to live in a gathering place outside. There's no need. But then there would be no hope of returning home." Erica wrinkled her nose and interrupted Colin. "On the entire island, only the Lap School has official wizards, and only the Lap School has the ability to train official wizards. Moreover, if you stay in the school, even if you can't become an official wizard, you still hope to return to Ryan with the school's 5-year admissions fleet." Quote. She sighed again, and went on, "If you go out and become a wild wizard, there's no hope. You also know that after the assessment is over, we will no longer be protected by the school, and those wild wizards on the periphery have long formed gangs. It used to be difficult for junior apprentices like us to survive, and it was impossible to do other things." Quote. Erica's face was full of loneliness, and she whispered, "I have no other choice but to go to the dark forest to try my luck, Colin." Colin was silent, and he could hear that Erica had considered it very carefully. So as the original owner, what Erica thought about, the original owner also thought about, they were all homesick. "I have no other choice, I can only go to the dark forest to fight." Erica said it again, her calm tone revealed firmness, as if to cheer herself up, and then added, "Anyway, I won't sell my body in order to stay in the school like Anne did." Mentioning this, she couldn't help shivering. Colin also felt uncomfortable reflexively, and Anne's hands and feet that had been replaced with several gray-black greasy tentacles appeared in his mind. For wizards, selling their bodies is really selling their bodies, not just that. Even if the senior apprentices he meets are slightly better, they are still just playthings, and the gains outweigh the losses. The two walked in silence for a while, and soon, they arrived at the residential area. The living area of junior apprentices is divided separately. On the westernmost side of the entire school, it is a square area with hundreds of single-family stone houses distributed at intervals. The stone house of the two is on the far left of the whole area, and Colin's stone house is closer. Walking to the door of the stone house where Colin lived, the two stopped. After a moment of silence, Erica said, "Colin." Boom. A sudden violent explosion accompanied by a strange scream came from a distance, interrupting Erica's words. Erica and Colin covered their ears reflexively and looked in the direction of the sound. After crossing the wooden fence surrounding the Lap Wizard collar, a strange green light glows like mist on the periphery of the wizard gathering place at the foot of the mountain. In the next second, an invisible transparent aura came from the top of the black stone castle in the center of the wizard's collar, just covering the entire wizard's collar. Colin quickly took a few deep breaths before recovering. The screaming sound in the distance was so weird that he felt dizzy and nauseated just by hearing it. Fortunately, with the opening of the transparent shield, although the screeching sound still exists, it has lost its weird sense of nausea. "I don't know what the hell it is this time," Erica murmured looking at the green light. Colin was silent, his blue eyes reflected the green flames in the distance, and his heart was inexplicably cold. Although he knew that he was in the safest Lap wizarding territory on the entire island, and that the green light would be dealt with by the wizards of the guard, he still felt a little chilly. That is probably the shock of a soul from a peaceful world witnessing the loss of life. "I don't know how many people will die," he whispered. Erica smiled, stopped paying attention to the green flames in the distance, turned her head to look at Colin and said, "You didn't think that way before." "Really?" Colin's heart shuddered, and he returned to his expressionless face, and responded calmly. You used to laugh at things like, death is only because of weakness, weakness is to make mistakes. Erica joked, but then her expression became depressed again. Quote. You're right. Weakness makes mistakes. Colin secretly sighed in his heart, and the embarrassment of being mentioned by the original master's second speech disappeared in an instant. For a moment, he didn't know how to continue, so he could only continue to remain silent. Power is the rule of this world. The words of the middle school students who were laughed at in the previous life have become the truth here. Let's not talk about that. I plan to go to the dark forest tomorrow morning. Erica smiled, hesitated for a moment, and then said, no matter what secrets you have, but if that day comes, please remember my request, greetings for me, tell me about my parents. There seemed to be a fog accumulating in the depths of her amber-green eyes looking at Colin. Colin's lips moved slightly, but in the end he just watched in silence as Erica walked into the stone room next door. How can the original owner have any secrets that can help advance? He shook his head and opened the wooden door behind him. At the beginning, he wanted to explain to Erica, but hesitated for a long time, and finally said nothing. He knew that even if he told Erica, he wouldn't believe it. And if she believed it, Erica would suffer even more. He could see that Erica went to the dark forest with the determination to die. He even felt that Erica actually knew that the original owner didn't have any secrets that could help her advance. She just needs to pin a hope on him. Colin walked into the house and locked the wooden door. When he turned his head, under the moonlight, he saw a huge broken pattern on the floor smeared with unknown blood. Seeing this pattern, he sighed again. How can the original owner have any secrets that can help advance? It was just a ritual that made him lose his life. Quote. Chapter 3 Gold Paper. The pattern on the floor was dilapidated, and the original four-pointed star could barely be seen. The traces of dried blood on it showed a dull black red under the moonlight. Colin walked to the edge of the bed and sat down. His thoughts could not help drifting to the early morning more than 10 hours ago. The rough stone walls, the cobblestone fireplace, the open wooden windows, the fresh blood at his feet in the moonlight, and him sitting pale on the edge of the bed, covering his head and looking around. This is the scene when he first time traveled. Before crossing, he was just an ordinary social animal. As a single man, he just bought a house with the help of his family this year, and he also took out a car with a loan. Although his usual work is boring, he is more relaxed and stable. In general, life is dull but happy. He never thought of crossing over. Colin came back to his senses, fell back and let his body fall on the bed. Boom. But immediately, he grinned and sat up again. He forgot that this was no longer his soft big bed. It's just a hard, cold plank bed. He was inexplicably irritable, and suddenly got up from the hard and cold wooden bed, paced to the window, and looked up at the bright moon in the sky that was very similar to the previous life. Although the weather is good tonight, there are still some clouds floating in the sky, swaying around the full moon under the blowing of the night wind, dyed bright silver. After a long time, he finally regained his composure, stomping his feet and shaking his hands, moving his hands and feet that were cooled by the cold wind in early spring. Not long after, he felt the blood flow to his limbs, and then he walked slowly to the wooden table next to the bed, leaned over and stretched out his right index finger. Laugh. There are no lighters, and no magic props. Just simply stretch out your fingers, mobilize your spirit, and invoke magic power, and a group of hot and dancing flames will suddenly appear on your fingertips. Colin stared at the dancing flames in his hands, his face was slightly startled, the flames flickered in his beautiful blue eyes, and there was an indescribable emotion. Apprentice trick, ignition, a genuinely extraordinary power. After a while, he lit the oil lamp, extinguished the flames at his fingertips, and prepared to clean up the mess left by the original owner in front of him. Busy rushing to class in the morning, he only had time to wipe his feet casually, and hurried out without even bringing the dry food for noon, and the floor was still a mess. The stone house where the original owner lived was built uniformly by the Lap School and provided identical single rooms for junior apprentices to live in. The area is not big or small, about 50 square meters, and the overall shape is rectangular. On both sides of the entrance hall are the washroom and the kitchen, followed by the bedroom, and further inside is a meditation room of about 10 square meters. And the pattern painted by the original master was right next to the bed, occupying nearly half of the entire bedroom. There are miscellaneous ritual objects scattered all over it, and it should take a lot of effort to clean it up. Taking out the broom from the bathroom, Colin was going to sweep the floor first. Incomplete bones, sweep away, ordinary pebbles, throw it away, crystals, keep it. He tidied up the ground deftly. After a while, his movements suddenly stopped. Reach out and grab a pure black ball with no visible material in the center of the ritual pattern. His heart was full of doubts, the original owner didn't have this thing in his memory. The slender white right palm gradually approached the black ball, but when it was about to touch it, there was a sudden pause. This is not on Earth, everything has to be more cautious. Single quote. Colin thought to himself, wanting to take back his hand and find something else that is convenient to deal with. But a burst of coolness came from the right hand unexpectedly. Colin's eyes widened, and the egg-sized black ball turned into a strange mist, gradually spreading to his body along the palm of his hand that he hadn't retracted in time. He got up staggeringly, raised his arms, and watched the weird black mist spread towards his body step by step at an extremely fast speed. His eyes were full of horror. Forearms, shoulders, chest, just in an instant, the mist spread under the head. Then, the mist seemed to have found its target, and they gathered together and rushed towards the head. Swish. Colin's mind buzzed, and he staggered down on the bed. In the early morning of the next day, the sky was light. Bang bang bang. There was a regular knock on the door outside the stone house. Colin fell on the bed, his eyelids trembled slightly, but he didn't wake up. The knock on the door continued for a while, and when no one opened the door, it gradually stopped. See. In the next second, a brown letter was inserted through the crack of the door. The strong craft paper made a slight friction sound against the floor, and the red and blue gradient wax seal was firmly stuck to the seal of the envelope, with the pattern of intertwined flames. After a while, after a slight sound of salsa writing, another piece of paper was stuffed next to the envelope. Then, there was the sound of footsteps fading away. The sun gradually rises from the sea level, plating gold on the jewel-like blue sea. After a while, the morning light penetrated through the gap of the wooden window and fell on the wood-grained floor, then moved slowly, gradually climbed onto the bed, and shone on Colin's pale face. After a while, Colin's slender eyelashes fluttered slightly, and finally slowly opened his eyes. The sun was dazzling, he subconsciously squinted his eyes, and raised his right hand to cover them. Immediately afterwards, he seemed to remember something, suddenly sat up, stood by the bed, looked around, raised his hands again, extended them, and looked back and forth carefully. The palms are white and full, the arms are slender and healthy, there is no extra hair, and there are not a few extra tentacles. Then check the whole body, everything is normal. Colin let out a long breath. He frowned slightly, and there was a strange feeling lingering in his heart. After hesitating for a while, he moved his mind according to his feeling. Dense pale golden particles suddenly appeared in front of him, and finally slowly gathered into a square golden paper. Colin's eyes widened. There are many strange and beautiful black lines densely intertwined on the gold paper. For some reason, this line inexplicably reminded him of the black ball last night. And this gold paper, he suddenly remembered. Isn't this a handicraft that he bought in the second-hand market in his previous life? Single quote. Could it be my golden finger? Single quote. The changes continued, and on the gold paper, those weird black lines suddenly squirmed and twisted. After a while, it turned into a few lines of words that he was most familiar with. Open black lens bracket name, Colin Leonard close black lens bracket. Level. Junior Wizard Apprentice, 53 100ths. Meditation. Apprentice Circle Meditation, 78 100ths. Witchcraft. Ignition 87 100ths, condensation 68 100ths, light 41 100ths. Open black lens bracket breakpoint 0 close black lens bracket. At the same time, two pieces of information came. Before the limit, anyone who practiced must make progress. After the limit, you can use the limit breaking point to break the limit and continue to improve. With his heart beating violently uncontrollably, Colin took a deep breath for a while, then seemed to think of something, and stretched out his right hand. Colin put down his hand and exhaled, and with a thought, he called out the gold paper. The pale golden particles converged, and the black text appeared again. His eyes quickly swept down, and in the column of witchcraft, behind the ignition, a up-pointing arrow symbol suddenly appeared, then gradually disappeared, and finally changed back to 87 100ths. Colin was overjoyed. Although the progress of the ignition technique had not changed, he could clearly feel the progress. The mana consumption seemed to be reduced a little, and the flame seemed to be a little more stable. Everyone who practices must make progress. His heart was beating violently, and he took several deep breaths without any relief. He walked quickly to the wall, opened the window, and the bright light oncoming made him narrow his eyes slightly. After he got used to it, he let himself look into the distance. Under the sunlight, the endless azure sea in the distance is shining brightly, and groups of white seabirds pass by low above, making jittery calls. A gust of sea breeze with damp breath gently brushed over his face, and he finally calmed down gradually while feeling refreshed. The appearance of the gold paper finally dispelled a lot of the oppressive haze lingering in his heart. This world is too dangerous. Strange rituals, strange world, 3-month deadline, strange green flames far away from the gathering place last night. Now, he finally had something to rely on. But it's not time to relax yet. He exhaled foul breath, cheered himself up, and walked towards the meditation room, ready to plan the next plan there. Click. The next second, Colin stopped moving forward, he raised his foot in doubt, and underneath was a crushed white shell. Last night, I suddenly fell into a coma in the middle of cleaning up, and now this place is still a mess. He thought for a while, then bent down to pick up the broom on the ground. Quote. Let's clean up here first, in case others find traces of the ceremony. Then he touched his stomach again, and decided to have a meal after cleaning. After all, he hasn't eaten anything since yesterday. Colin looked back at the kitchen, ready to sweep the floor. But the next second, he looked up at the door again. Under the wooden door, lay a brown letter and a piece of white paper quietly. The breeze passing through the gap between the door panel and the ground is blowing the white paper slightly shaking. Colin frowned slightly, dropped his broom, and walked towards the door. Chapter 4 Limit Breaking Points. Colin Leonard, you didn't seem to be there when you came here, or you didn't hear my knock on the door in the meditation room. Anyway, do you remember what I asked you to do last night? If one day, you can meet my parents, please help me to bring this letter to them. Please. Quote. There are some traces of smearing on the white paper here, it seems to be hesitating, followed by the last sentence. Finally, I wish you a successful advancement and become a great official wizard in the future. Erica Holy Flame. After reading the white paper, Colin felt silent. He brought another brown letter to him for inspection. The red and blue flame-shaped wax seal on it was exquisite and gorgeous. This is the Holy Flame Kingdom, a badge belonging to the royal family. Put away the brown letter, fold the other white paper and put it aside. Colin continued to pick up the broom and pick up the pieces. After tidying up, he drank a piece of coarse wheat bread with the cold water in the water tank in the kitchen, and then went straight to the meditation room without stopping. Erica's letter made his slightly relaxed mind tense again. He was far from being able to relax. Goldfinger hasn't fully figured it out yet. What is the breaking point? Can it help him to successfully advance within the 3-month deadline? If not, how to save his life in the gathering place outside, how to avoid being squeezed, even how to obtain further resources. Laugh. Use igniter to light the oil lamps and incense in the meditation room. In the flickering firelight, Colin crossed his legs, turned the glass hourglass beside him upside down, slowly closed his eyes, and prepared to take the lead in testing the effect of meditation. There are no windows in the meditation room, and the daylight is forced to be isolated. The whole room only emits a faint light from an oil lamp, and next to it is a slender stick of incense, which emits a calming aroma as it burns. The sun slowly across the sky, its warm rays of light across the earth, the sea, and finally sank at the junction of the sea and the sky, leaving only the last bit of broken light to sprinkle gold powder on the undulating sea. Colin suddenly opened his eyes amidst the jittery chirping of seabirds returning to their nests in the evening. The last ray of fine yellow sand is sliding down the 7-hour glass hourglass on the right. With a thought in his mind, Colin breathed out the golden paper. In the pale golden light that only he could see, Colin smiled. In the column of meditation methods, the progress of the circular meditation method has quietly changed from 78 100ths to 85 100ths. In the column of grades, there is also a up-pointing arrow symbol behind the junior wizard apprentice, but it is extremely weak and fleeting. Can you increase the progress of meditation by 1 point in 1 hour? After closing the gold paper, Colin stood up and moved his body. According to the proficiency of meditation methods and their own aptitude, different wizards have a limited time to meditate each time, and then they need to sleep and wait for their bodies to recover before continuing to meditate. Today's meditation time has reached the upper limit. He bent down to extinguish the incense sticks, and then began to think. The original owner's aptitude is not good. He has practiced for nearly 10 years, and he is only a junior wizard apprentice 53/100ths, which will be more than half. If you want to successfully advance in the next 3 months, it seems that you can only do it in the next 3 months. Spend more time on meditation methods. Single quote. Colin glanced at the hourglass, and took a closer look at himself. Judging from this meditation, the meditation method has been improved by 7 points. In the case of no change in aptitude, the training time has been slightly shortened, which will affect the magic power in the body. The boost also seems to have increased slightly from before. Single quote. In this case, if the meditation method can break through the limit and be greatly improved, it seems that it is not a fantasy to advance within 3 months. Single quote. The pale golden particles gathered, and Colin looked at the bottom column, frowning secretly. Breakthrough point, what exactly is it? Single quote. Could it be? He seemed to think of something, and walked quickly towards the meditation room. A few minutes later, Colin held a magic stone left by the original owner in his hand, and called out the golden paper with a little expectation. After the gold paper appeared, his gaze didn't stop at all. He went straight to the last line, and then focused on it. After a while, a cool breath gradually came from the magic stone in his hand. The black 0 character after the limit breaking point on the last line of the gold paper is also gradually beating. Colin was overjoyed, and then continued to stabilize his mind and concentrate. Soon, the magic stone gradually turned into gravel, and the black characters after the limit breaking point also changed to 1. Excited, Colin took out the last magic stone left by the original owner, intending to continue transforming the breaking point. But in the next second, he hesitated for a moment and then stopped, pondering to himself. Don't worry, you still have to keep some magic stones in your hand. Although the accommodation in the school is free, and food will be distributed at the beginning of each month, but you need magic stones to get other things. The school will only distribute 1 magic stone to junior apprentices every year. There are very few magic stones, but the apprentices of the original owner don't have to worry about life on weekdays, they just concentrate on their studies. The situation is similar to that of the students who went to school in the previous life. They all have no jobs and their main job is to concentrate on studying. 1 magic stone per year is similar to the pocket money of an ordinary student in his previous life, excluding living expenses. So not too much. The original owner has stayed for so many years, but only saved 2 magic stones. Let's keep it for now. Anyway, the magic stone can be turned into a limit point at any time, but the limit point cannot be turned into a magic stone. Moreover, the meditation method has not been cultivated to the limit, and there is no need for a limit point, he mused to himself. Time flies by. After dinner every afternoon, when the sun was gradually setting, Colin would enter the meditation room to meditate until the moon was in the sky, and he would go to bed and rest when he reached the upper limit of cultivation. In the rest of the time, he was not idle, but was practicing all kinds of witchcraft. Occasionally, when he was tired, he opened the window facing the sea, leaned against the window edge, quietly blowing the sea breeze, and looked at the distant place. The magnificent blue ocean. The seabirds are leisurely and sparkling. No matter it is early in the morning or late at night, they are all beautiful. It is a rare scene for him who lived in the mainland in his previous life. When he empties his brain and diverges his thoughts, he occasionally thinks about it in bitterness. It is located on the hillside like this, with a sea view house with a beautiful view. It's enough. Maybe a lifetime is not enough. Of course, the life here is not so good. The earthen stoves that need to burn wood are used for cooking. There is no need to think about big fish and meat, because it is close to the sea, and some fish and seafood will be distributed every month, but when it is their turn, only the middle level and above wizard apprentices left behind, usually dry goods such as salted fish, and the staple food is only some grains, coarse wheat bread and the like. But fortunately, there is the fire technique for making fire, and the water condensation technique for drinking water, which somewhat avoids some troubles. On the rare occasions when his mind wandered, he would still look at the stone house next door from the side window, but Erica hadn't come back yet. On the evening of the 3rd day, in the meditation room, The yellow sand flowed down from the gap in the middle of the glass hourglass, only about 6/7 of it flowed, and Colin slowly opened his eyes. His meditation time has reached the upper limit. Gold paper appears with the mind. On the surface where the material cannot be seen, several rows of text are neatly arranged. Open black lens bracket name, Colin Leonard close black lens bracket. Level. Junior Wizard Apprentice, 53 100ths. Open black lens bracket meditation method. Apprentice Circle Meditation Method, 100 100ths, up pointing arrow close black lens bracket. Witchcraft. Ignition, 100 100ths, up pointing arrow. Condensation, 73 100ths, light, 61 100ths. Open black lens bracket breakpoint. 1 close black lens bracket. During these 3 days, he not only practiced the meditation method to the limit, but also practiced the fire ignition technique to the limit. Because it is inconvenient to practice the water condensation technique, it only increased by 5 points, but the light technique increased by a full 20 points, and now it can be cast instantly. Generally speaking, when any witchcraft is first learned, it is necessary to recite awkward spells and make corresponding gestures. But then as proficiency increases, the understanding of witchcraft deepens. The time required for spells and gestures will become shorter and shorter, and finally a clear witchcraft model will be formed in the mind, and it can be cast instantly. The prompt on the panel corresponds to a progress of 60 100ths. Colin shook his head, suppressed his complicated thoughts, and let out a breath. Then I will concentrate and head towards the up-pointing arrow symbol behind the apprenticeship circle meditation method. Boom. The black rising symbol trembled slightly, blurred, but then returned to its original shape. Colin's heart sank. Chapter 5 The Witchcraft Crystal. It should be that breaking the limit is not enough. After careful consideration, Colin came to a conclusion. On the gold paper, the up-pointing arrow behind the ignition that also reached the limit looks more solid, and there is a faint blue light around the outline. On the other hand, the up-pointing arrow of the meditation method seems a bit illusory, and there is no blue outline light at the same time. Colin took out the gray cloth purse inside his clothes, took out the last remaining magic stone from it, and held it in his hand. But soon, he let go of his hand again, hesitating in his heart. If the last magic stone is absorbed, the breaking point is still not enough. Single quote. He stood up worriedly, walked out of the meditation room, and came to the window facing the sea. The sun is setting, the sky and the earth are dim, only a little yellow light remains, and the night is coming. He leaned against the window. After a long time of contemplation, he still put the magic stone into the gray purse, and then walked towards the wooden cabinet next to the bed. If this magic stone is not enough, it will be difficult to earn new magic stones later. He didn't dare to gamble, and planned to change to a more secure path, keeping this magic stone as the principal. The wooden cabinet is not big, and Colin spent some time sorting out the things inside. In the end, apart from some junk, the only valuable things are 1 copy of Sunlight Breathing Method, 1 copy of Common Basic Wizardry in Apprenticeship, and 1 copy of Introduction to Elementary Wizardry Crystal Making. Daylight Breathing Method was purchased by the original owner a few years ago by an old apprentice in the market, saying that it can improve the ability in that area. Of course, the reason why the original owner bought this book was not to improve his abilities in that area. I bought it mainly because during that time, it was very popular among their group of apprentices to practice night breathing. In addition, this breathing method is very cheap, so I just started. It's a pity that after the original owner bought it back, he couldn't get started after practicing for a long time, so he threw it in the wooden cabinet to accumulate dust. Universal Apprenticeship Basic Sorcery was bought at the bookstore opened by the school earlier. The original owner also threw it aside after learning a few witchcraft commonly used in daily life. The original owner's talent is very poor, which is reflected in various aspects, including learning the basic knowledge of wizards. The cultivation of a wizard cannot be accomplished overnight, and requires a lot of pre-basic knowledge. In the past, apart from meditation, the original owner was thinking about the newly acquired knowledge every day, and there was no extra time to learn more witchcraft. It wasn't until I had almost mastered the basic knowledge in the past 2 years that I finally had some free time, but it was also spent on finding ways to improve my realm. After all, if you can't advance to an intermediate apprentice within 10 years, you will be kicked out of the school. In addition, there is no need to worry too much about accommodation, food, safety, etc. in the school, so the original owner naturally chose to spend all his energy on improving the realm first. As for the last book, Introduction to Elementary Witchcraft Crystal Making, it is exactly the more secure path that Colin wants to find. The original owner bought this book only recently. It was originally intended as a skill for making a living in gathering places outside after being kicked out of the school, but then he accidentally learned of a weird ritual that can help advance. So it was thrown away. After all, if you can stay in the school, who is willing to go to the gathering place outside? Unfortunately, the ceremony failed, and he paid the price with his life. Colin picked up the production primer, put it in his hand and opened it. His plan is very simple, he just wants to see if he can learn to make witchcraft crystals in a short time with the aid of gold paper. If he could, he would use the remaining magic stone to buy raw material crystals, and then make them into witchcraft crystals to earn more magic stones. If not, then find another way out. Introduction to Making Elemental Witchcraft Crystals, with a light yellow cover was slowly opened. Crystal, which grows near the magic stone veins, is a natural and perfect thing to carry magic power, so the witchcraft crystal came into being. This is the opening introduction, which mainly briefly introduces the source of witchcraft crystals. From the second page onwards, it is all dry goods, the first third is the selection of crystals, and then there are more than 10 different types of witchcraft crystals. The specific production methods. As the moon rose, a silvery path of light appeared on the sparkling sea. Under the oil lamp, Colin read through the whole book word by word, and then slowly closed it. Maybe it's the credit of the gold paper, or maybe he's more talented than the original owner. After reading the crafting book in its entirety, he didn't encounter any obscure points. With a flash in his eyes, he decided to strike while the iron was hot, and now began to practice making witchcraft crystals. It just so happened that the original owner left over 20 crystals and raw materials because of the ceremony. Colin got up with the book, went to the table to get the crystal, walked into the meditation room and sat down cross-legged. After carefully reading and thinking for a while, he decided to learn how to make bright crystals. Bright crystal is mainly used for lighting, especially indoors. Compared with oil lamps, it is not only brighter, has no peculiar smell, and does not have to worry about causing fires, but also lasts for a long time. Even a bright crystal made of the worst miscellaneous crystal can usually be recharged at least 30 times, and each illumination is about 3 hours. Therefore, there is more demand for bright crystals in the market. In addition, one of the few witchcraft that the original master had learned was the art of light. Although luminescence is quite different from making a bright crystal, the two have similarities in essence, and choosing it may save some time. There is no need to meditate to adjust the state, nor to light the incense sticks that have a calming effect. Colin holds a crystal and starts making. According to the book, first of all, the magic power needs to be molded into a specific shape, and slowly injected into the crystal according to a special frequency. Time passed quietly, he either made a mistake in shaping the magic power, or made a mistake in changing the frequency. But fortunately, with the golden paper, he can feel improved after every failure. Finally, after almost an hour, he managed to inject magic into the crystal. After completing this step, the next step is to use magic power to describe the witchcraft model in the crystal and establish a witchcraft circuit. Colin held his breath and carefully constructed the model with magic power. This step is not like the first step. If something goes wrong, the crystal will also be shattered and scrapped. Subscribe to Chinese Novel Audiobook YouTube channel. Chapter 6 Going Out. Buzz. The soft white light emitted, overshadowing the yellow light of the oil lamp, illuminating the entire meditation room. Colin moved his neck and let out a relaxed breath. It was now noon the next day, and the sun was shining brightly. If the meditation room had not had windows, it would have been bright at this moment. Of course, the meditation room is also bright at the moment. The bright crystal in Colin's hand is steadily and continuously emitting soft white light. With a thought, the light gold particles gathered, and he looked at the gold paper. Above the limit breaking point column, a new column appeared, Skill, Elementary Witchcraft Crystal Production. Use your mind to open it, and a new line slowly appears below, Bright Crystal Production, 1/100th. The gold paper classifies the production of apprentice-level witchcraft crystals into broad categories. If you click on it, you can see the folded information on the production progress of different types of witchcraft crystals. After consuming more than 20 remaining crystals from the original owner and spending more than 10 hours, Colin finally succeeded once by luck. Although this speed is faster than most people's time to succeed once, it is nothing. When I bought this book, the old apprentice who sold it once said that someone successfully made a witchcraft crystal in half a day. Of course, he later learned that there was a huge gap between a lucky success and stable production. However, he has the help of gold paper. As long as he keeps making it, no matter whether it is successful or not, there will be improvement. It's just that the improvement of failure is small, and the improvement of success is big. The pale golden particles that only he could see floated and spread in the air, and the bright crystal in his hand emitted a warm white light. Colin's heart was filled with peace of mind. Perhaps, as Erica said, do I still have a chance to become an official wizard? He shook his head and suppressed his reverie. We still have to see how much improvement the meditation method will have after breaking through the limit. Single quote. But after a while, the thoughts in his mind couldn't help but start to diverge. A wizard apprentice is only a mortal body, and even a senior apprentice has a lifespan limit of only 120 years, but a formal wizard. If I remember correctly, Teacher Rapp has lived for almost 300 years, 300 years. How many world events have changed and dynasties have changed? Goo goo. The rumbling sound in his stomach interrupted Colin's fantasy. He stood up and walked out of the meditation room, preparing to go to the kitchen to get something to eat. After lunch, Colin was so sleepy that he fell asleep. It was not until midnight that he rubbed his sleepy eyes, got dressed and got up. After listening to the sound of waves and blowing the sea breeze by the window, and admiring the bright sea of stars reflected on the sea level for a while, he started to pack his things and prepared to go out to buy raw material crystals at dawn. The black iron identity badge of the school must be worn. Only with it can you feel safe in the gathering place outside. Needless to say, the wallet containing magic stones must also be brought. It seems that these are the only two things you need to bring. Single quote. Colin took the money bag, seemed to have thought of something, and walked towards the meditation room. After a while, with dust flying, he picked up a dusty knight's sword from the wooden stand in the corner of the meditation room. The original owner bought this sword together with breathing method. The original owner put a layer of grease on it before putting it here, so there is no problem after being left there for so long, except for some dust accumulation. Unfortunately, for him, who is not a knight, this sword is just a decoration and will not be of much use if he encounters any crisis. Perhaps I can practice the knight's breathing technique later, he thought as he put the knight's sword back on the wooden stand. The wizard's health is not in bad shape because the magic power subtly strengthens his physique during meditation. However, it's just not bad. In the junior wizard apprenticeship stage, magic power can only make the body healthier. If you want to achieve qualitative strengthening, you have to wait until you become an official wizard. It is precisely because of this that many apprentices who have spare capacity will also learn a breathing method as a backup method during the apprenticeship stage. After all, a junior apprentice who has not mastered much witchcraft may not be able to compete with the peak knight in terms of combat power alone. The great knights after the peak knights not only have a maximum lifespan of 150 years, but are also pretty good in terms of combat power. It's just that it can't be compared with a wizard, even a junior wizard apprentice. Of course, the premise is that he is a junior wizard apprentice with complete means. He is not considered that. After all, the cavalier's shortcomings are too obvious and can easily be targeted. Just one standard witchcraft against mortal knights, psychic shock, is enough to deal with most ordinary knights. Of course, as wizards and part-time knights, they don't have this shortcoming. Junior wizard apprentices like them, who have been laying the foundation and have not learned much witchcraft, usually use knights' methods in daily fights. After all, knights' methods are more subtle and less dynamic than most witchcraft. Skills are not a burden. Rather than becoming a formal wizard, it may be more realistic to rely on gold paper to become a great knight and extend your life to 150 years. Colin thought unexpectedly. Then he bent down again and took out a brown half-leather armor from the lower level of the wooden stand where the sword was placed. This was also bought together with breathing technique. Knight's sword, breathing technique, and half-leather armor were purchased together as a set. Carrying the leather armor, Colin did not dislike it this time. Instead, he took it out, wiped it clean and put it on directly under the wizard's robe. After putting on the leather armor, although he knew it might not be of much use, he still felt that it added a lot of security. After that, he walked around the stone house a few more times, and finally found a piece of iron the size of a human face from the corner of the kitchen. After thinking for a while, he tied it to the chest of the leather armor, and the sense of security suddenly increased. After several twists and turns, the sky was already dark. After counting the items he brought again, Colin took a deep breath, opened the wooden door, and walked out. There is a lot of fog on the beach. It is not yet bright at this time and is still a little dark. A gauze-like white mist floats in the air. The gravel path was extremely quiet, which is also the norm where I live. Apart from the hard laborers who pull excrement and the stewards who deliver food, few people come here every month. Most of the apprentices also have heavy schoolwork, don't have much time to socialize, and don't have to run around for meals, so they basically stay at home and rarely go out. After walking out of the residence and walking a few dozen meters along the wooden fence, you arrived at the main entrance of the wizard's territory. It is said to be the main entrance, but it is actually just a simple wooden door that can be opened and closed by cutting two sections from the fence. The wooden doors are wide and narrow. The wide one is for the convenience of transporting materials, and the narrow one is for people to pass through. The narrow gate has no lock, but is tied with an iron rod. Colin pulled away the iron bar and checked again whether he had the school identity badge before opening the door and going out. The wooden fence around the school is not high, it can even be called short, only a little over 1 meter. Its function is only to prevent some small animals from intruding. The real school fence was actually the translucent shield he had seen rising the other night. It was a large witch formation, which is why you had to double check whether you were wearing an identity badge. The identity badge is bound 1-to-1, and you can only enter the territory of the lap school with it. If you forget to bring it, you will be in trouble. After walking out of the narrow door and walking a few hundred meters further, buildings gradually appeared, and only then did they really step out of the witch formation's monitoring range. The first thing that greeted us was a neat gray building built on a hillside. Here are mainly various shops opened by the school and a trading market. Further down is a small group of houses of different styles, in which live the best group of people in the wizard gathering place outside. The small town at the foot of the mountain further away is what they usually call the gathering place for the outside world. 10 minutes later, Colin arrived at the middle market. Although there are also crystals sold in the store, and they have a complete range of varieties, various qualities, and large quantities. But the price is naturally higher than that of retail traders setting up stalls in the market. If it's normal, maybe for convenience, you don't care much about the slight price difference. But now, he only has one magic stone in his body. If he wants to buy as many crystals as possible, he still has to go to the market. The market was a large square open space. Perhaps it was too early, and there were only a few stalls on the open space at this time, none of which sold crystals. Colin stood there and waited for a while, until the sun rose from the sea level and the gorgeous morning glow filled the sky, and then a stall selling crystals appeared. "How do you sell mixed crystals?" He walked up and asked the price. "1 magic stone 60, 20 gold coins 1. The stall owner replied. Colin nodded and did not buy it, but waited a little longer. Later, several crystal vendors came to set up stalls, and he went to ask about the price. Finally, after several comparisons, he spent a long time at the penultimate vendor. "I just replaced the only magic stone on my body with 65 miscellaneous crystals and a small pack of bonus crystal powder." After that, without any further delay, he immediately set out on his way back. Chapter 7 Revenge. Walking quickly all the way, Colin finally breathed a sigh of relief until he entered the school and felt the power of the witch formation. When walking outside, everyone will remain respectful when they see the black badge pinned on his chest. But he himself is just an ordinary junior wizard apprentice, and he is really not confident enough. The crystal stall owner he was bargaining with was an intermediate wizard apprentice. Although he is estimated to be over 60 years old and has reached the peak of his life, the stall owner can still make him lose his life as long as he is willing. This feeling that his life depends on other people's thoughts really makes him feel a little depressed. Colin slightly adjusted the half-body leather armor that was a little out of place due to walking, but his expression was indistinguishable. Pushing open the narrow door and tying the iron rod, he turned to look at the wide door next door. Several carriages were passing slowly there. There were 4 carriages in total, loaded with goods, and the horsemen driving them were all ordinary people. On the island, this means they are all slaves. At the front was the steward riding a brown horse alone, wearing ordinary gray wizard robes. Judging from the slightly different but still black badge on his chest, he must be a junior wizard apprentice, about 40 years old. The steward also saw Colin, signaled the convoy to stop, and then greeted him respectfully. Colin nodded in response and moved on. There is only one road in front of him, and the middle-aged manager is waiting for him to take it first. After Colin walked to the front of the motorcade, the steward waited for a while longer, then signaled to the drivers behind him to move forward, dismounted himself, and walked instead. He did not go to talk to Colin in front of him, but kept an appropriate distance and followed behind. At this point in time, junior wizard apprentices like Colin have no hope of advancing. After 3 months, he was kicked out of the school and his status was not even as good as his. It was no longer worth fawning over. Of course, there is no need to offend, just be respectful and keep your distance. It's April already. Single quote. Listening to the tapping of horse hooves behind him, Colin suddenly thought. Generally speaking, the day to send daily necessities is the first day of each month. But do the math. Single quote. He then thought about it. Since the 6th year, their courses have become monthly. Depending on when the instructor is available, they will be given in advance or at short notice. The last time I had a class was at the end of March, and now a few days later, it's already April. So, starting from today, there are really only 3 months left. A feeling of nervousness suddenly surged in his heart. Check. Suddenly, a faint shout seemed to come from the wind, and it instantly turned into a muffled roar. Colin was startled and subconsciously slowed down, looking at the junior apprentice residential area not far ahead. Although he has been in this world for several days, he is still very insecure and cautious about all changes. There are no fences in the residential area, and neatly arranged stone houses are symmetrically distributed on both sides of the main road. He glanced around, but saw no one. The wind continued to blow, and he gradually stopped and focused on his hearing. Jia, Ming, are you in a situation? Or, the Mutual Aid Club, the daily necessities for this month? Another person's voice came over, and he also determined the specific location of the voice. It was probably on the right side of the main road in the residential area. The voice was intermittent and weak, and it was difficult to hear what was being said, but there was a vague sense of familiarity. Sir, what's wrong? At this time, the steward who was following behind to transport supplies saw Colin stop. After a moment of silence, he led the horse to Colin and asked proactively. The sound coming from the distance was weak. He was still quite far away from Colin just now, so he didn't hear it. Quote. Nothing. I suddenly remembered something. A strange look flashed in Colin's eyes. He shook his head and explained, and then said, if you want to rush to deliver supplies, just leave first, there is no need to follow me. Quote. Okay, my lord. The middle-aged steward had some doubts on his face, but he didn't think much. He called to the convoy behind him, bowed to Colin, and got on his horse. Drive. Colin got out of the way and stood on the side of the road, watching the 4 carriages passing slowly in front of him. The convoy transporting supplies must first go to the intermediate level and above wizards who live in castles far away to select. The main road in the middle of their residence is the only way to get there. No matter what happened in the gathering place ahead, it was probably just a dispute between the students and would not affect the convoy. However, it was unknown whether it would affect him. To be cautious, let the team take the lead, which would at least give him some more reaction time. In this strange world, you have to be careful about everything. The last carriage slowly passed in front of him. Colin's eyes flashed, and he suddenly took steps, following the left side of the carriage and walking side by side with it. Because it carried a large amount of supplies, the carriage was not very fast, and it only needed to increase its pace to keep up. The driver on the carriage felt someone beside the carriage and looked back. As a result, he accidentally made eye contact with Colin. He subconsciously turned around in panic, but quickly turned back in fear, and forced out a shaky smile. Colin waved his hand and didn't care. Unless ordinary people or relatives of the wizard, they will always be the lowest slaves on this island. Soon, the convoy entered the main road in the residential area, which was not wide. Colin quickened his pace and walked to the middle of the carriage so that his figure was completely obscured. The coachman sitting in front straightened his back and looked nervous. The motorcade continued to drive, and through the gap in the carriage, Colin turned his head and looked to the right, where the sound he just heard came from. His sight passed through closed stone houses and empty alleys. Everything seemed peaceful, and the sound just now was just an illusion. Colin continued to observe. Soon, he noticed something strange. In the third dark alley between stone houses, 3 figures stood in the middle, covering the road completely. At this time, they were watching the motorcade passing by outside the alley. Charlie, Owen, and the one who is a little unclear in the shadows, the Black Haywood. What are they gathering there for? Colin had doubts in his mind. That's Jeff. Then his pupils shrank and his heartbeat suddenly accelerated. Behind the 3 Charlies, a figure with a face covered in blood suddenly stood up. Although the figure's face was obscured by blood, it was a bit blurry. But in class that day, under Charlie's speech, Jeff's disdainful ridicule and the figure who left first are still vivid in my mind. There was no mistaking it, it was Jeff. The scene in the alley gradually disappeared from his sight, and Colin gradually turned back. Is Charlie taking revenge on Jeff for humiliating him that day? He secretly speculated. Although the logic made sense, he still felt a little strange, but how could Haywood and Irving be with him? Did Jeff offend these 2 people too? Or is it the helper Charlie found? Single quote. And the Mutual Aid Association. He now remembered the vague voice coming from the wind before. If he guessed correctly, it should be Charlie's. After following the carriage for a while, Colin turned into an alley on the left and circled back to his stone house. After returning to the stone house, he put aside the matters in the alley, had a hasty breakfast, and walked into the meditation room without stopping. He's going to start making bright crystals. Chapter 8 Solar Breathing. In the meditation room, under the dim light of the oil lamp, colorful crystals were piled in small piles on the brown blanket, shining brightly. Click. Colin sighed inwardly and threw the crystal fragments in his hand into the wooden bowl on the left. Then he picked up a new mixed crystal in front of him and continued making it. Since returning to the stone house, except for eating at noon and opening the door in the afternoon to move the daily necessities piled at the door delivered by the convoy, he spent the rest of the time making crystals. After the magic power is consumed, he meditates on the spot to recover. After recovering, he resumes making. Until now evening. The oil lamp flickers in the meditation room. There was a small pile of crystal fragments in the wooden bowl on Colin's left, but there were very few finished crystals on his right. After a while, he slowly exhaled, a hint of joy flashed in his eyes, and placed the successfully crafted bright crystal in his hand on his right side. Then he rubbed his sore head. The consumed magic power can be restored through meditation, but the consumed spirit can only be restored through sleep. 35 left. He counted the number of crystals left, and he had a clearer idea of how many times he could try to make witchcraft crystals in a day. About 30 per day, and every 10 made, the magic power needs to be restored. It is estimated that it should increase with proficiency and level in the future. Single quote. He then counted the number of bright crystals successfully produced on his right-hand side. There are 7 in total, the success rate is about a little over 20%. Single quote. According to the market price of bright crystal, such a success rate is a loss. But he's not worried. Under the influence of gold paper, his success rate in making crystals is increasing rapidly. According to the current progress, there are enough crystals left for him to increase the success rate of making bright crystals to 50%. A success rate of 50% means no loss, and a success rate of more than 50% means turning losses into profits. Noon the next day. After lunch, Colin went to the market with the 20 bright crystals he had successfully made most of yesterday and this morning. So far, all 65 crystals have been consumed. After some selling, buying and haggling in the market, the 20 bright crystals in his hand have been replaced by 45 mixed crystals. He quickly returned to the stone house. In the evening, the sunset is brilliant. Colin had just finished his meditation and walked out of the meditation room, leaning against the window and looking at the scenery. He found that he had nothing to do for a while. Today's meditation time has reached the upper limit, and the number of times I have made witchcraft crystals has also reached the upper limit. If you haven't started making witchcraft crystals a few days ago, you can keep practicing witchcraft to pass the time. But now the daily work of making bright crystal consumes a lot of his energy. Although you can still cast witchcraft, it is a bit difficult to practice it all the time. So there is always some time available. The setting sun outside the window is like fire, and birds are flying on the sea level. But he didn't have much time to relax. After frowning and thinking for a while, he felt something in his heart, turned around, walked to the wooden cabinet next to the bed, and bent down. When he got up, He was holding an old book with a yellow cover in his hand, Solar Breathing Technique. The miserable state of Jeff he saw when he came back yesterday made him feel uneasy. Anyway, he has nothing to do now, so he plans to practice the knight's breathing technique. As for learning witchcraft, if you still have time, consider it again. After all, learning witchcraft and practicing witchcraft will consume your energy. It will consume energy and affect the production of witchcraft crystals. The production of witchcraft crystal is directly related to whether he can advance. This is his most important goal now. Compared with it, everything else has to take a back seat. Time to press the accelerator button again. In the days that followed, Colin made crystals every morning, practiced solar breathing in the afternoon, meditated in the evening, and used the scattered time in between to practice witchcraft. Life is fulfilling and regular. 2 days later, the 45 newly acquired crystals were exhausted again. Colin went to the market and brought back 75 mixed crystals this time. After another 2 days, the 75 mixed crystals turned into 125. Soon, another week passed. As the afternoon approaches evening, I sit beside the bed in the stone house. Colin was practicing solar breathing with his shirt off, and his strong chest rose and fell regularly with the breathing movements. Sweat slowly dripped down his angular chin and fell to the wooden floor, making a tiny splash. His exposed upper body is strong and muscular, with clearly visible collarbones, sculpted chest muscles, neatly arranged six-pack abs, and deep mermaid lines. His muscles are well defined without appearing too strong. He also didn't expect that in just 11 days, his originally thin body would become like this. This aspect is due to the solar breathing method. On the other hand, thanks to the food distributed by the school, the portions are sufficient and the variety is rich. Otherwise, it would not be that easy to improve to the current level. Sweat dripped continuously, Colin's expression was focused, his chest and abdomen rose and fell rhythmically with the movements, and the complete set of movements was almost completed. After a while, Colin retracted his arms, stood still with his feet apart, and then let out a long breath. With a thought, golden particles appeared. Name: Colin Leonard. Level: Junior Wizard Apprentice, 53 100ths, Junior Knight, 69 100ths. Meditation Method: Apprenticeship Circle Meditation Method, 100 100ths, up pointing arrow. Solar Breathing Method, 100 100ths, up pointing arrow. Witchcraft: Ignition, 100 100ths, up pointing arrow. Water Condensation, 80 100ths, light, 85 100ths. Break Limit Point: 1. Colin's face showed joy. Compared with the slowness of the wizard's training, the knight's training was like riding a rocket. In these 11 days, he not only practiced the solar breathing method to the limit, but also directly transformed from an ordinary person to a junior knight, and even the progress of the knight level has surpassed that of the wizard. It would be great if wizards could practice so quickly. Colin shook his head and walked to the bathroom to take a shower. Compared to wizards, knights are a very weak system. A junior knight, strengthened by blood energy, has physical fitness equivalent to that of an athlete in his previous life. Intermediate knights reach the limits of the human body. A high-level knight, whose blood condenses into life seeds, and whose physical fitness exceeds the limits of the human body. But even a high-ranking knight is only a mortal body without armor, and can be wounded by swords, water, and fire. This situation will not change qualitatively until you break through the peak of knighthood, become a great knight, and the life seeds are sublimated. The strength of the great knight far exceeds the limit of the human body. He can tear apart tigers and leopards with his bare hands. His blood energy extends to more magical functions. He is equivalent to wearing a thick layer of cowhide armor without even wearing a single strand. However, the human body has its limits, and the knight's defense is still limited. Without the transformation of witchcraft, the flesh and blood body is still inferior to steel plates and rocks, the mortal body is still afraid of high temperatures and poisonous gases. And the mental protection is at most a little stronger than ordinary people. Facing a junior wizard apprentice who has all the means, he loses more and wins less. After all, for wizards, most witchcraft can be cast instantly after being proficient. As long as the distance is not very close, it is enough to release 2 or 3 psychic shocks. And the impact of witchcraft on the soul, even the great knight couldn't resist a few attacks. This is still the world of wizards after all. Chapter 9 Choice. After taking a shower, there is still some time before evening. Colin packed up the crystal he had made in the past few days and was going to go to the market to sell it now. On the 5th day, the production progress of the light crystal on gold paper had been pushed to the limit, and the success rate reached 100%. He can now make up to 45 bright crystals a day, which would be about 1.5 pieces of magic stone. Leaving aside the cost of the crystal, the profit is 0.75 magic stone. In other words, he can now steadily earn 0.75 magic stones every day. It had been 4 days since he last went to the market, and he had collected 160 bright crystals in his hand, worth 6 magic stones. When he goes to the market later, he plans to keep some of the magic stones to replenish the crystal raw materials, and absorb the rest as limit breaking points to try to see if the meditation method can successfully break through the limits. You're here again. The owner of the shop selling witchcraft crystals greeted him with a smile. Well, a total of 160, you count. Colin poured the bright crystal in the bag onto the tray lined with cotton cloth in front of the boss. Since the first time he came to set up a stall to sell bright crystals, it took him a whole morning, and he also paid the stall rental to the market. He chose to sell directly to a shop specializing in witchcraft crystals. The price difference between the two is not big, and it can save a lot of time. Okay, I believe in your credibility. Although the boss said this, he kept counting in his hands. There are 6 magic stones in total, here you go. 2 minutes later, the boss finished counting and took out 6 magic stones and handed them to Colin with a smile. You go slowly, welcome to come again next time. Colin nodded and took the magic stone and put it in his pocket. Although his face was expressionless, he was a little excited in his heart. As he walked quickly towards the wizard leader, he quietly put his right hand into the pocket containing the magic stone. With a thought, pale golden particles gathered. Focus on the limit breaking point column. 1, 2, 3. The black characters jumped slowly, and soon it reached 5. There were 2 magic stones left in his pocket. But the up-pointing arrow behind the circle meditation method has been quietly enveloped in a circle of light blue outline light. Colin was so happy that he almost wanted to return to the stone house immediately to start a breakthrough. But not yet. Suppressing his inner excitement, he hurried to the market to buy crystal raw materials. After searching around, I couldn't find the crystal stall that used to be cheaper, it might have closed down. So he randomly chose a stall that was closer and had no patience to continue to spend time negotiating with the stall owner. He directly used a magic stone and some leftover gold coins to exchange for 80 crystals, and hurried back to the wizard to get them. Walking out of the market, passing through the shops, and entering the monitoring range of the wizard's leading witch array. It was still a few hundred meters away from the wooden fence at the edge of the wizard's territory. There is a fairly flat and wide mountain road in the middle. Since it is going up the mountain, there are steps with stone slabs in the steep parts. If it weren't for the help of witchcraft, it would be a headache to transport daily necessities every month due to the mountain roads and stairs. Walking on the compact mountain road, Colin looked a little hesitant, but in the next second, he put his hand into his pocket again and absorbed the last remaining magic stone into a limit breaking point. I kept the magic stones before so that I could have the capital to buy crystals. But now you can only make up to 40 crystals per day. Unless you can exceed the upper limit, buying more will only save you a few trips to the market. So it is better to turn it into your own power as soon as possible. Your own power is everything. Soon, the last magic stone turned into gravel, and the character slowly changed to 6 after breaking the limit point. There are deep jungles on both sides of the mountain road, and you can occasionally see some wild animals while walking on the road. The sun was setting in the west, and the sunlight became weak, and even some could not penetrate the dense leaves. In the woods on both sides, strange calls gradually began to sound. Colin tightened his clothes. The strong sea breeze in the evening and the screams from the dense forest made him feel a little scared, and he couldn't help but walk a little faster. Although the chirping of insects, birds and some weird roars sounded from time to time. But he felt that the world was inexplicably silent. On the long mountain road, it seemed that the only sound was my own footsteps. After a while, he was suddenly startled and his steps gradually stopped. At the corner of the mountain road, a blonde figure came out, followed immediately by 2 more people. Colin, what a coincidence. The blonde figure greeted with surprise. Charlie, Haywood, and Owen, are you still going out so late? Colin responded with a smile, while continuing to walk forward. Wait a minute, Colin. Charlie smiled and raised his hand to stop him. I just have something to ask you. What are you looking for? For me? Colin stopped, His heart sank, but he asked with just the right amount of doubt on his face. That's it. Charlie took the initiative to walk up to Colin and patted his shoulder, and then shouted to the back, Jeff, come here quickly. Okay, boss. Another figure walked out from the corner in front of him. It was brown-haired Jeff. He was smiling, and there were no scars on his slightly dark face. Colin was shocked, but quickly regained his composure. Sensing Colin's shock, Charlie smiled slightly. This was exactly the effect he wanted to bring about by conquering Jeff in the first place. When get out of class was over, Jeff was the first to leave early, but he later joined the mutual aid group. Charlie took the initiative to explain, and then his voice changed. Colin, can I delay you for a moment? I remember that you also left early before, so I came to you this time specifically to introduce you to the mutual aid club. Do you think it's okay? After saying that, Charlie looked at Colin with an expectant smile. Colin's face was expressionless and he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. No wonder they chose to block him at this place. Combined with the scene in the alley he saw last time, he already understood everything. Obviously, whether he listened to Charlie's next words or not, he had only one choice, and that was to join the mutual aid group. Otherwise, what awaits him will be the same fate as Jeff last time. Quote. You say it. Colin hesitated for a moment and nodded. Chapter 10 Breaking Limits. Charlie pondered for a moment and then spoke slowly. As the name you heard, the Mutual Aid Association is an organization where everyone helps each other in the gathering place. You may think it's useless, but do you know what kind of situation we will be in when we go to the gathering place outside? Colin shook his head. Slave. Charlie looked calm. Once we leave the school, we will lose our asylum. But in the past 10 years, we have learned a lot of knowledge and received the most complete wizard education on the entire island. This is a huge fortune, a fortune we cannot afford. How many people in the gathering do you think will covet it? Colin frowned, a little confused. We have all signed a witchcraft contract and cannot teach the knowledge we have learned to anyone outside the school. But we are too weak. Charlie interrupted Colin and said in a deep voice. We are just junior wizard apprentices. Over the past 10 years, a lot of knowledge has consumed most of our time and energy. The faculty have been emphasizing advancement, and the 10-year deadline is always hanging over our heads. Except for simple tricks, who of us is willing to spend time learning powerful witchcraft that takes at least half a year to get started? He took a step forward and stared at Colin. Although the junior wizard apprentices in the gathering place do not have as solid and comprehensive foundation as us, they may only be intermediate wizard apprentices in their lifetime. But in terms of combat ability, we can't compare. You're right, Colin, we can't teach the knowledge we learned in the school. Charlie looked calm, looking at the sun that was about to sink in the distance and said slowly. But we can be controlled and enslaved, all it takes is a simple slave contract. Although our qualifications are not excellent among the schools, they are average or even above average among the gathering places. As long as we have time, we will be at least intermediate apprentices in the future, and even senior apprentices. So it doesn't matter if we can't access our knowledge, we are a wealth in ourselves. Colin's lips moved slightly, as if he wanted to refute something. But Charlie seemed to see what he was thinking, and replied in advance, the school will not care, Colin. The wizards of the school are so high up that they don't bother to care. Charlie sighed and turned to look at Colin. His face was calm, but there was an inexplicable look in his eyes. So, you want to join the fraternity, Colin? The setting sun sank into the sea, and the world fell into darkness. Buzz. Owen behind Charlie took out a bright crystal and cast a spell to light it up. Soft white light came from behind Charlie, making his expression increasingly unclear. Colin stood one person's distance in front of Charlie, keeping calm and thinking. If what Charlie said is true, then joining the Mutual Aid Association is undoubtedly a win-win good thing. Single quote. However, if the gathering place outside is really like this, then what's the use of these junior wizard apprentices getting together? Single quote. When the time comes, even a senior apprentice won't be able to handle it. Furthermore, although what Charlie said is logically complete, there is no substantial evidence, and the original owner has never heard this information in his memory. What's more, with the golden paper here, what he needs to do now is to let the meditation method break the limit. If after breaking the limit, there is still no hope of advancing within 3 months, then it is time for him to consider what will happen after leaving the school. Quote. Charlie, I need time to think about it. Colin replied with a frown. His heartbeat accelerated slightly, and he carefully observed Charlie's expression. The gold paper has been summoned, and if Charlie turns against him, he will immediately add limit-breaking points to witchcraft such as ignition, hoping to escape a severe beating with limit-breaking witchcraft. Members of the school are prohibited from hurting each other's lives, so there should be no need to worry about your life. Huh. Hearing this, the tall bald black man Haywood behind Charlie looked angry and wanted to rush forward. Colin's heart skipped a beat. Haywood. Charlie raised his hand to stop him in a deep voice. After a moment of silence, he looked at Colin and said with a smile. Haywood has this kind of character. It doesn't matter, Colin, you think about it first, and I will come to you later. As soon as he finished speaking, he led the three of them past Colin and hurried down the mountain. Colin turned his head and looked at the backs of Charlie and his party, feeling relieved. He didn't expect Charlie to let him go so easily. It seems, I am indeed overthinking it. Maybe it was just a coincidence that they met me. But soon, he frowned again. I always feel, something is wrong. He thought for a while, but when he couldn't come up with any results, he stopped thinking about it, released the ignition technique, and walked quickly towards the wizard leader with the faint firelight. As for Charlie's last words about visiting again, he didn't take it to heart. No matter what secrets there are, no matter what conspiracies there are, it's always just a cuckolding between junior apprentices. As long as he can advance, he can jump out of the chessboard, and everything will naturally be solved. Boss, are you just going to let him go? Jeff suddenly asked while walking on the road. Jeff, you have to understand, violence is only the worst method. Sooner or later, Colin will be convinced and take the initiative to join the mutual aid group. Charlie replied calmly. He glanced at Jeff, who was still a little confused, and continued to add. After knowing the threats from outside gathering places, those who were originally unwilling to join the Mutual Aid Association will be shaken to some extent. In a few months, everyone will leave the rap school. No one can live alone. They will eventually understand that joining a mutual aid group is the only way out. Quote. Jeff nodded heavily, enlightened. He was originally unwilling to join the mutual aid group. But after receiving a beating and learning about the dangers Charlie mentioned, he was already shaken. And today Charlie also offered to take him to see the evidence. In fact, he now has no doubts about what Charlie said. Before, he had misunderstood the Mutual Aid Association and misunderstood Charlie's original intention. Asterisk. Meditation indoor. Colin was sitting cross-legged on the brown blanket in the middle, reaching out to light the soothing incense. The subtle smoke is accompanied by a calming aroma. The pale golden particles gathered, and Colin took a deep breath and no longer hesitated. Concentrate and focus hard on the up-pointing arrow symbol after the circle meditation method. Boom. In an instant, complex knowledge appeared in his mind out of thin air, making him unable to help but close his eyes and enter meditation. Time passed by minute. The moon slowly rose above the head in the night sky, bringing some glimmer of light to the dark wizard's tie. The dark forest in the north was lifeless and silent, and the coast in the south was rough, and the waves hit the rocks, making a dull rushing sound. At some point, a ray of golden light quietly emerged from the sea level in the east, plating the gem-like blue sea with gold. In the meditation room, Colin, who had been sitting all night, suddenly opened his eyes. It was as if rings appeared one after another in his blue eyes, and then disappeared again. His mind moved, and the golden paper appeared in front of him. Name: Colin Leonard. Level: Junior Wizard Apprentice, 54 100ths, Junior Knight, 69 100ths. Meditation Method: Apprenticeship Circle Meditation Method I, 1 100th, Solar Breathing Method, 100 100ths, Up-Pointing Arrow. Witchcraft: Ignition, 100 100ths, Up-Pointing Arrow. Water Condensation, 80 100ths, Light, 85 100ths. Skill: Elementary Witchcraft Crystal Production. Break Limit Point: 1. The circle meditation method has successfully pushed the limits. Compared with before, the meditation method after breaking through the limit has an extra circle of blue outline light on the gold paper, followed by an additional eye, which should represent a breakthrough of the limit. Of course, what surprised him the most was that the progress of the junior wizard apprentices in the level column actually increased a little. I just don't know if it's due to accumulation or the result of meditating all night last night. Single quote. Colin couldn't suppress his excitement. He stood up suddenly and wandered around for a while before gradually calming down. We'll find out when we meditate again tomorrow. As for now, the meditation time has reached the upper limit, and there is no way to continue trying. Single quote. The excitement gradually subsided, followed by the feeling of sleepiness and hunger after a sleepless night. He stood there and couldn't help but yawned. Then he walked out of the meditation room, took off his clothes, lay on the bed, and fell asleep. Chapter 11 Energetic. When I woke up, it was already noon. Lunch was seafood with flatbread. After eating, he went to the meditation room, lit incense sticks, sat down cross-legged, turned the hourglass upside down, and began to meditate. Time passes like fine yellow gravel in an hourglass. The meditation room was very quiet, with only the rustling of yellow sand and Colin's inaudible breathing. After an unknown amount of time, he slowly opened his eyes, moved his head, and looked at the hourglass. About 5 hours have passed. After careful observation, he judged in his mind. Then he stood up and moved his somewhat stiff limbs. At the earliest, the original owner's limit of meditation per day was almost 7 hours. After the golden paper appeared, the meditation method was pushed to the limit, and the limit of meditation per day became 6 hours. But now that the circle meditation method has broken through the limit once, the limit duration of daily meditation has been reduced by about 1 hour, and now only takes about 5 hours. But the reduction in duration does not mean that the magic power gained every day is reduced. He obviously felt that after breaking the limit once, the magic power gained during the 2 meditations became more. But to make an accurate estimate, you still have to look at the gold paper. With some expectation, he breathed out the golden paper. Pale golden particles gathered in front of him. Level: Junior Wizard Apprentice, 55 100ths, Junior Knight, 69 100ths. He felt happy. In the level column, the Junior Wizard Apprentice was 54 100ths, which suddenly changed to the Junior Wizard Apprentice 55 100ths. Same as last night, it has increased a little. This means that every time I meditate, I can improve the level by a little. Single quote. We are now 45 points away from the limit of Junior Wizard Apprentice. Converted into days, that is 45 days, 1.5 months. And now there are still 2.5 months before the assessment, so it's totally in time. Single quote. The big stone in Colin's heart finally fell to the ground. He stood there for a while before calming down. Unfortunately, there is no one to share this feeling. What to do now? He sat down cross-legged again, thinking to himself. In other words, where are the remaining limit breaking points allocated? Single quote. Bright crystal making, ignition, solar breathing, it seems that these 3 are reaching the limit now. After pondering for a moment, he called out the golden paper and focused his thoughts on the solar breathing method. Ignition is the first to be eliminated. It is just a trick. Breaking the limit should not improve much. Of course, if you have money later, you can also try to improve it, but there is no need to do it so early. As for the production of bright crystals, he originally wanted to improve it first. But he inexplicably thought of what Charlie had said to him before, I will come to you again. So he had a change of heart and planned to let the solar breathing method break through the limit first, so that at least Charlie could come to him and increase his strength somewhat. But then he thought that it was just a magic stone anyway. Even if it was improved later, the difference would only be 1 or 2 days, so there was no need to worry too much. Just like the meditation method to break through the limit, as the limit breaking point is consumed, complicated knowledge continues to emerge in the mind. But this time the time was much shorter than the meditation method to break through the limit. After about 20 minutes, Colin opened his eyes. He stood up and walked out of the meditation room, came to the bedside in the bedroom, and began to practice the solar breathing method after breaking the limit. After breaking the limit, the movements of the solar breathing method are much more complicated than before, and the timing of the coordination of breathing and movements is also more precise. After a while, Colin stood up and let out a long breath, sweat dripping down his chin. He raised his hand and wiped his sweat while exhaling the gold paper. Level: Junior Wizard Apprentice, 55 100ths, Junior Knight, 79 100ths. I actually improved 10 points after just one practice. Colin was a little surprised. You must know that he can practice solar breathing at least 7 or 8 times a day. If he practices solar breathing after breaking the limit from the beginning, it will only take him a little more than a day to reach the Junior Knight limit. After a short rest, he continued to practice breathing techniques again. Finally, at the zenith of the moon, he felt a rush of heat suddenly spread from his chest to his limbs, causing all the muscles in his body to swell slightly, as if he were soaking in a hot spring. After a few more minutes, he came to his senses and pulled out the gold paper. Level: Junior Wizard Apprentice, 55 100ths, Intermediate Knight, 1 100th. Sure enough, he had successfully broken through. Colin jumped on the spot, walked to the bed again, leaned over and clasped the bottom of the bed, and tentatively lifted it up. After struggling around like this, he gained a clearer understanding of his own power. Then he looked at the time and gave up the idea of continuing to practice solar breathing. He quickly took a shower and went to the meditation room to start making bright crystals. Time flies by like this. Life has returned to the same routine as before. In the morning, I make witchcraft crystals, in the afternoon I practice solar breathing, and in the evening I meditate. The odd time in between is used to practice old witchcraft and learn new witchcraft. On the afternoon of the 10th day, the stone house. Colin was standing naked on the edge of the bed, with his feet spread out and his eyes closed. The knotted muscles all over his body were trembling like a tumbling python, causing his skin to turn red and his whole body to be filled with white heat. After an unknown amount of time, he slowly opened his eyes and exhaled a breath of white breath, which was clearly visible in the air. The pale golden particles gathered, and he looked at the knights with a calm expression. With the blessing of a limit-breaking solar breathing method, in just 10 days, he progressed from a junior knight to the advanced knight stage. The life seeds condensed after the blood in the chest was ignited or exuding vitality, filling the body with strength. During this time, he also understood the uniqueness of solar breathing. The solar breathing method is not like other breathing methods that increase strength, speed, flexibility, or explosion. Its improvements in strength, speed, flexibility, explosiveness, etc. are relatively balanced, with nothing particularly outstanding. But only the energy aspect has been greatly improved. From this point of view, the old apprentice selling books did not lie to him. It's just not accurate enough. The increase in energy really strengthened that aspect. But for Colin now, the real value of solar breathing is giving him a few more hours of discretionary time each day. He now only needs 5 hours of sleep a day to maintain full energy throughout the day. Not only that, the abundant energy also slightly increases the efficiency of meditation and the upper limit of making witchcraft crystals per day. After taking a shower as usual, Colin got dressed, took the bright crystals he had saved in the past 2 days, and went out to the store to sell crystals. Subscribe to Chinese Novel Audiobook YouTube channel Chapter 12B Sting. Here you go. The shop owner smiled and handed over the magic stone. Colin took it skillfully, put it in his arms, turned around and walked out of the shop. As he walked, he turned his back to the boss and stuffed the magic stone into the already bulging gray money bag. It can be said that he is much richer now than before. Unfortunately, in this world, wealth does not bring him as much security as it did in his previous life. Walking out the door, the weather is sunny. Suddenly, he had a thought in his mind and walked towards the market. Perhaps you can buy some knight combat skills and the like. After all, the magic stone is just magic stone if you keep it in your hand. It is valuable to spend it to turn it into strength, he thought to himself. Solar breathing is only a practice method and does not have supporting combat skills. So much so that he now has the rank of a senior knight, but does not have the matching combat power. Come to the market. Colin walked around but didn't find any stall selling knight combat skills. However, this is normal, regardless of the shops or markets on the mountain. Most of the things sold are related to wizards. There are all kinds of witchcraft secrets, witchcraft robes, witchcraft crystals, and various monster materials. But things like the knight's breathing technique can only be seen very occasionally. He looked up at the sky, and it looked like it would still be some time before dark. He hesitated and continued walking down the mountain. The mountain on the island is not high and the slope is gentle. The entire gathering place is located on the southeast side of the hillside. The highest point is the Lap Wizard territory, and at the foot of the mountain is a small town. Counting ordinary people, there are a total of 180,000 or 90,000 people on the island. There are about 8 to 9,000 wizards among them, and most of them are junior apprentices. Most of the less than 1,000 wizards left are intermediate apprentices. The Lap School is the only force on the entire island, with the only official wizard. Thinking all the way, he walked for a long time and finally saw a city gate, about 4 or 5 meters high, with yellow-gray earth walls of the same height extending on both sides. Standing at the doorway were 4 burly men wearing steel armor, all carrying long swords on their backs. Powerful chi and blood rushed to his face. They should all be great knights. Colin secretly guessed. Only when you get here can you truly arrive at the gathering place on the island. Previously, the area on the mountain near the school was inhabited by wizards who were at least intermediate apprentice level. It is closer to the magic stone vein under the Lap wizard's territory, and the concentration of magic energy is relatively high. Only capable wizards usually live there. Most other wizards and ordinary people still live in this small town at the foot of the mountain. Walking closer to the city gate, Colin discovered that there was a gray plaque above the doorway. Although the handwriting is very blurry, if you look carefully you can still make out the word, Blackstone. Under the respectful gaze of the great night guard at the door, Colin took back the identity badge he took out of his pocket and walked into the city. The original owner had been here several times before. He was no stranger to this small town, and he came to a shop selling books with ease. Before entering the store, he pinned the school badge on his chest and slowly walked in. The store is not big, more like a jewelry store in its past life than a bookstore. Every book is solemnly stored in a sturdy iron cabinet. Some particularly precious ones are stored in small protective covers. The boss was sitting behind the counter and resting. He glanced at Colin, who came in. After seeing the triangle badge of the rap school on his chest, he quickly stood up and greeted warmly. "Sir, welcome, what do you need? Do you have any knightly combat skills?" Colin responded with a slight nod. His attitude towards his boss was not surprising. The Lap school was the unquestioned ruler of the island. "Yes, sir, they are all in the cabinet over here." The boss with a goatee led Colin to the counter on the left, then pulled out a thick piece of paper from the ground and handed it to Colin with both hands. "Here you go, here's the table of contents." Colin nodded and took it. There is not much content in the catalog, just the name, introduction, and price. He looked at it for a long time, but didn't see anything satisfactory. Mortal combat skills are indeed weak. Let's get this Kan Guang. After hesitating, he said. The yellow paper in the catalog is divided into 6 levels according to the strength of the combat skills. The most expensive level has 3 combat skills, each with secret skills. Colin picked the one whose profile looked the most powerful. Of course it wasn't that great, so he could only hope that the gold paper would break the limit. After paying 1.5 magic stones and signing a general contract, the terms were probably only for personal use and not to be passed on to others. The goatee boss then opened the iron cabinet and handed Kan Guang to him. After Colin got it, he flipped through it casually and frowned. "What's the matter, sir? Is there something wrong with the book?" Boss Goatee's heart skipped a beat and he asked hurriedly. "It's okay." Colin shook his head in denial, then turned around and asked, "Do you know where I can buy rapiers?" He took a brief look at this Kan Guang book. It was a combat skill book focusing on thrusting. It recommended the use of a rapier. But the knight's sword in the original owner's home was an ordinary long sword. "I know, sir." The boss wiped the sweat from his forehead and replied quickly, "Just next door, there is a shop that sells knight swords." Colin nodded slightly, put away the light, and prepared to buy a thin sword. He can now earn 1.5 magic stones every day, which can be said to be very wealthy. When he was about to walk out of the store, he suddenly stopped in his tracks. Outside a grocery store on the opposite street, a familiar blonde young man was walking hurriedly. "Charlie, why is he here?" Colin was a little confused. Although you don't have to go to a place like the Dark Forest to come here, you need to ask the school for instructions. But generally speaking, members of the school will not come here if they have nothing to do. Could it be that he brought Jeff and the 3 of them here so late last time? Colin thought about the last chance encounter again. Last time, he thought that Charlie and his party should just go to the market shop outside the wizard's territory. But now it seems that maybe they also came here that evening. Colin took a step back into the store, waved his hand to appease the nervous boss, and then peeked at Charlie through the cover of the counter. Charlie was unaware of his gaze and hurried forward, finally turning into an alley not far to the left. After his figure completely disappeared, Colin walked out of the store. His eyes flickered as he looked at the entrance of the alley where Charlie disappeared. But he immediately looked back and followed what the bookstore owner said and went to the shop on the right that sold knight swords. Don't worry about things you shouldn't worry about, don't do things you shouldn't do. The knight sword shop is filled with all kinds of knight swords. A rapier, sir, please wait a moment while I look for it, the burly boss said respectfully. Not long after, he came back holding a stack of long boxes. arranging the boxes one at a time. Inside were rapiers of different lengths and shapes. Since Colin had said it in advance, the ones he took were all high quality. It didn't take Colin too much time to choose a rapier. He always believed in the principle that you get what you pay for, so he directly chose the most expensive rapier, which cost 1 magic stone. The rapier is called Bee Needle and is about 95 centimeters including the handle. The guard is an unpretentious round shape. At this point, today's task has been completed. Colin hung the bee needle around his waist. His half-length blonde hair was smooth and shiny, and his blue eyes were full of energy. With his toned figure trained by solar breathing method and today's dress of shirt and vest, he looked like he had stepped out of a drama script. Handsome young knight. He subconsciously stroked Feng Zhen's exquisite scabbard. A man's love for weapons is engraved in his bones. As an ordinary person in his previous life, he rarely had the opportunity to play with genuine knight swords. When I came to this world, there was no mobile phone or internet. During his short breaks every day, apart from blowing the sea breeze and watching the sea view by the window, what he did most was play with the knight's sword left by the original owner. Now there are new knight swords to play with. Colin had a smile on his face. The quality of this bee needle, which is worth 1 magic stone, is obviously far superior to the ordinary knight sword left by the original owner. Although the appearance is simple, the details are full of elegance. While walking on the road, Colin wanted to pull it out several times and wave it around. Unfortunately, this is the city. However, as soon as you leave the city, there are plenty of bushes on the mountain roads to enjoy. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but speed up his pace. But soon, he burst into laughter again. Inexplicably, he remembered the scene when he was a child in his previous life, when he picked up a long and straight wooden stick next to the continuous rapeseed field after school. It is true that once you have a stick in your hand, the cauliflower will have no head for 10 miles. Chapter 13 Class. Unfortunately, I don't know if there are such large fields of cauliflower in this world. Colin was daydreaming while walking with long strides. The bee needle was firmly fixed on the brown leather sword given by the shop owner on his waist without making any sound. After a while, evening came, the sun set, and a deep yellow enveloped the earth. There is a curfew in the small town. As night falls, there are more pedestrians on the dirt road, and carriages will pass by from time to time. He walked among the crowd, but it was not crowded. Pedestrians around him took the initiative to keep a 1-meter distance from him. There is a clear hierarchy on the island, and those who can dress like him in this small town are either core members of the gang, or children of the family, or even worse, they are related to the wizard. After walking for a while, we gradually came to the edge of the small town. There were more sharecroppers with farm tools and fishermen with dark skin and fishy smell on the road, and carriages were rarely seen. The houses on both sides of the street have gradually changed from wooden houses to mud houses made of mud and seaweed. Some are not even seaweed houses, but just simple tents made of palm leaves. The passers-by were also humbler. When they saw Colin, they were either cowering in the house or standing there with their heads down in fear. After walking for a while, the sound of a woman sobbing suddenly came from the front, mixed with the sound of a baby crying loudly. Turning a corner, Colin saw the source of the sound. In front of a palm hut on the roadside, a woman wearing tattered linen clothes was holding a baby wrapped in black cloth and fell to the ground crying. There were several men dressed as fishermen surrounding her. The strong young man at the head of the group also held a cloth bag in his hand. He handed the cloth bag to the woman. "This is the only thing left by gal, take it." "Hello." At this time, the man next to him caught a glimpse of Colin and quickly reminded him in a low voice, then lowered his head and stood aside. The sturdy young man glanced back, and when he saw Colin, he quickly bent down and lowered his head. Colin looked calm and dull and continued to move forward. The woman also saw him, and immediately swallowed her sobs hard, and then used her other hand to forcefully cover the mouth of the baby in her arms. But although the voice disappeared, tears continued to flow. Big drops of hot tears dripped from the woman's chin and fell to the ground, staining dark spots. The face of the baby in her arms quickly turned red, and its struggle became more intense. Colin sighed slightly in his heart and quickened his pace. But suddenly, whether it was because the woman couldn't bear it or because the baby was struggling too hard, the harsh crying sounded again. The woman's expression changed drastically, and she quickly covered the baby's mouth. Colin didn't pause or turn his head, he just looked ahead and walked past quickly with no expression on his face. Soon, he left the area. Although he didn't hear everything, he estimated that the woman had lost her husband, a fisherman. The sea is vast and magnificent, but it is also full of dangers. Such things happen from time to time. Compared with this, he cared more about the attitude of people passing by in the shanty town when they saw him. Class. He sighed inaudibly. In fact, except for wizards, all other ordinary people on the island should be of the same class. Those people didn't recognize him as a wizard, so they shouldn't be so respectful. However, there are obviously differences between ordinary people. The status of ordinary people in shantytowns and those who are related to wizards is naturally very different. Earlier, he had heard that there was a father of a junior wizard apprentice in the city who came to the edge of the shanty town to deliberately provoke people. Then wait until those people can't bear it anymore and start to fight back, and then use the powerful night power to kill them brutally for fun. Although the guards later discovered this situation, but the punishment was just to prohibit him from committing the crime again and fine him some magic stones. The island is poor in supplies and there are many ferocious and strange beasts in the wild. Ordinary people can only rely on wizards if they want to survive here. This is one of the reasons for the supernatural status of wizards. A teacher once said that 60 years ago, the Lap school had not yet arrived on this island. Originally, the official wizards on the island had died, and only some senior apprentices were left. Relying on the relics left by their ancestors, they could barely cope with the strange things at night and the ferocious beasts in the wild. As a result, the gathering place is getting smaller day by day, and it is constantly forced to shrink its area. It was not until the arrival of the Lap wizard that the gathering place gradually began to stop shrinking, and even expanded in reverse. It has now been expanded back to its original edge, and the damaged earth wall around the perimeter has been reinforced and repaired. This is the power of official wizards and the unbreakable guarantee of the status of the Lap school. Thinking about it all the way, we were almost reaching the city gate. A thin man suddenly jumped out from the road not far away, and then stopped in the middle of the dirt road inexplicably. Colin stopped and looked at him with a frown. The man was standing with his body hunched over, facing him sideways, with his head bowed. The yellow light of the setting sun illuminated him into a black silhouette, making him even more skinny. The backlight made it difficult for Colin to see the man's face. He pondered for a moment and planned to take out his ID badge from his pocket. In a small town, with the way he is dressed, most people will not mess with him. As for the remaining small part, you only need to take out the ID badge in your pocket to settle it. Colin looked at the man and fumbled for his badge in his pocket. He gradually adapted to the backlight, and the man's figure became clearer in his sight. Why? He keeps shaking. Colin's pupils shrank, and a feeling of uneasiness suddenly surged in his heart. He immediately took out the hand that was in his pocket, quickly formed a seal, moved his lips, recited a spell in a low voice, and stepped back at the same time. At the moment when his spell sounded, the man standing on the dirt in front of him suddenly made a move. He slowly raised his head and looked at Colin, his eyes glowing with a strange green light. Colin's heart tightened suddenly, and he continued to recite the curse while speeding up his retreat. At this moment, a loud noise came from the direction where the man on the right had just appeared. There seemed to be something wrong with the man's body. His head suddenly dropped heavily and his body continued to tremble. This time there was even a large pool of blood gushing out of his mouth, spilling out, and making a strange hissing sound when it came into contact with the ground. A few more seconds passed, and the rickety man finally regained his breath and gradually straightened his back. But at this time, Colin had already retreated dozens of meters away, and the witchcraft he had performed had come to an end. Buzz. As the last syllable fell out, translucent white light enveloped Colin's body. But then it suddenly broke and disappeared. Colin's face turned pale, he suppressed the discomfort of failed spell casting, pulled out the bee sting from his waist, and continued to retreat quickly. The white light is steel armor, a powerful witchcraft he has been learning recently. Unfortunately, despite the help of gold paper, 10 days is still too short, and there is still some distance from getting started. Not only does it take a long time to cast, but it is also easy to fail. Seeing himself getting further and further away from the strange green man, Colin felt a little relieved. Although he is now a senior knight, this power is nothing before the real danger. The man's weird appearance and glowing green eyes were clearly something he couldn't handle. Why take risks? A decisive retreat is the right choice. It's a pity I couldn't successfully cast the steel armor. Just when Colin kept thinking, the thin man who had completely straightened his back suddenly looked at him. In the dim world, those green eyes stood out. Colin was startled, stared at the thin man, and continued to step back and distance himself. Although there is quite a distance now, blindly turning around and running away is still the worst option. The next second, the man suddenly ran towards him, so fast that the distance between them was within 10 meters in the blink of an eye. My heart seemed to be clenched. At this speed, there is no way to escape. Single quote. Colin exhaled heavily, stopped, held the bee sting in his hand, and prepared to fight. At this moment, an orange-red beam of light suddenly shot from the right rear of the thin man. The man was startled, jumped hard, and curled up. His reaction was already very fast, but his waist and abdomen were still hit by the beam. The man groaned. The place where the waist came into contact with the beam has disappeared, leaving only a charred gap. But this only aroused the man's ferocity. He ignored the threats behind him and just rushed towards Colin. It looked like he wanted to use a backrest. With the previous jump, the man was only 3 meters away from Colin. He widened his eyes, stared at Colin fiercely with his glowing green eyes, and roared hoarsely. Die, 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 you guys all deserve to die. But what he didn't expect was that a dazzling white light suddenly erupted on the chest of the handsome young man in front of him. The field of vision was completely white, and the man waved his hands randomly. At this time, there was only an insignificant trace of the setting sun on the horizon, and the sky was extremely dark. The sudden burst of white light caused him to temporarily lose his sight without any preparation. Colin looked at the strange man in front of him and thought again. A burst of flame suddenly appeared in the crotch of the man's linen pants. Then more flames appeared one after another in different locations on the man's clothes. The man yelled angrily, but the flames on his body soon caused him to lie on the ground and roll unconsciously. It's a pity that the man was only wearing ordinary linen clothes after all, and was not impregnated with fuel. The fire was quickly brought under control as he tumbled. When Colin saw this, he quickly took the bee sting and stabbed the man in the head. Before the sharp blade in his hand could touch the man's skin, an orange-red beam hit his head first. Half of the man's head disappeared. But despite being so severely injured, his body was still moving. Then another orange-red beam shot out again, completely erasing the man's head. At this time, his body gradually stopped moving. The rich smell of burnt meat mixed with the aroma of roasted meat filled the air. Colin's stomach was churning, and his face became paler. He looked up at the figure wearing a wizard's robe slowly walking over, took out the triangular identity badge from his pocket, and signaled to the other party. Chapter 14 Exchange. The flash technique is used well, third-class apprentice. Walking towards him was a tall figure wearing a gray robe with a golden triangular badge of the Lap School on his chest. At this time, he was lifting his hood while lightly praising Colin. After lifting the hood, what appeared in front of Colin was a red-haired man with messy hair and a beard on his chin. The overall appearance was somewhat vicissitudes, and he looked about 30 or 40 years old. Thank you, teacher. Colin quickly bent down and thanked him. The third-class apprentice is another name for the junior wizard apprentice, and the golden badge on the chest of the red-haired man represents that he is the senior wizard apprentice of the school, that is, the first-class wizard apprentice. Generally speaking, the basic wizard courses of Colin and others within the school are taught in turn by first-class apprentices like the red-haired man. Therefore, they are generally called teachers by junior apprentices like Colin. In addition, first-class apprentices not only need to teach knowledge, but also have different responsibilities. The red-haired man seems to be in the guard team. The red-haired teacher nodded noncommittally, and then waved his right hand. The orange fireball suddenly appeared, carrying a heat wave and hitting the mutilated body of the green man. Colin next to him looked calm, but he was shocked in his heart. The fire was raging, and the smell of meat became stronger in the air. Colin subconsciously took 2 steps to the side and walked upwind. Don't be nervous. For polluters, this is necessary treatment. The red-haired man had already walked up to Colin and explained calmly, then changed the subject. As for you, you also need to be tested. Testing? Colin asked deliberately. The red-haired man did not answer, but stared at him expressionlessly and said calmly, relax, don't resist. Then the lips moved slightly and the surgery began. The flames emanating from the burning corpse cast a shadow on Colin's face. He clenched the bee needle in his hand, and the leather-wrapped handle felt delicate to the touch. He didn't know whether the gold paper would be detected and found, and he didn't know whether the previous rituals performed by the original owner would leave traces on his body. But he had no other choice. Colin stood calmly, trying to relax his whole body. A few seconds later, a white light was emitted from the red-haired man's hand and scanned Colin from head to toe. The place where the white light passed felt like being immersed in a hot spring. Although there was no discomfort, Colin still felt very uncomfortable. Okay, third-class apprentice, you can leave. The red-haired man said after confirming the result. Okay, instructor. Colin lowered his head and felt relieved, but at the same time he was also thinking a lot. Still not strong enough. He sighed in his heart. Oh, by the way, there's one more thing, the red-haired man stopped him. Colin stopped and turned back in confusion. That witchcraft that's a bit like ignition, is the second witchcraft behind you just now. What is it? Why have I never seen it before? Did you improve it yourself? No, teacher. That's a witchcraft I bought at the market. It doesn't have a name. The seller calls it ignition. The effect is similar to the ignition technique, except that it can ignite fire from a distance without physical contact. The range is about half centered on the self, meters away. Colin pondered for a moment and replied calmly. This so-called fire technique, and the flash technique that the red-haired teacher mistook before, are actually the ignition technique and the light technique after breaking the limit once. During this time, he was not only learning a new witchcraft, steel armor, but he had also broken the limit of all the witchcraft he had mastered. As he expected, the power of tricks such as light and ignition did not increase much after breaking the limit. However, sometimes using your brain cleverly like today can achieve unexpected results. Third-class apprentice, I am very interested in this witchcraft. I am willing to exchange it for equal knowledge or magic stones. Can you? The red-haired teacher continued. It's my honor, teacher. Colin was stunned and quickly answered. Then do you want magic stones, or knowledge of equal value? The red-haired teacher nodded with satisfaction, and added, if it is knowledge, I have several witchcraft of equal value for you to choose from. I choose knowledge. Colin answered without hesitation. Wise decision. The teacher praised, and then he turned to look at the end of the street. After we have taken care of this place, we will find a suitable place to exchange. Colin followed his gaze. There were 5 people running towards us at the end of the street. The leader was wearing a wizard's robe and a silver wrap school badge. The 4 people behind him were wearing stainless steel plate armor and carrying large swords on their backs. Sir. The leader of the wizard apprentice came to the red-haired teacher and greeted him respectfully. The red-haired teacher nodded, and then said, the polluter has been dealt with. I'm going to leave now. Come back to me if you need anything. Then he motioned for Colin to follow him. After turning around, he seemed to remember something again. He paused and turned back to remind the intermediate apprentice, please remember to purify the embers later. Okay, sir. The intermediate apprentice responded respectfully. The red-haired teacher nodded and continued walking forward. Colin hurriedly followed up and took another look at the burning body next to him before leaving. At this time, most of the corpse had been burned. The new second-class apprentice seemed to think that the fire was not strong enough, so he stood aside and directed 4 plate armor knights to pour kerosene on it. Colin was also keenly aware that deep in the churning flames, there seemed to be a strange green light appearing and disappearing, which was a bit unsettling. Thick fire oil poured from the leather bag, and the flames suddenly rose to half a person's height. Colin stopped looking and turned to follow the red-haired teacher. The exchange of witchcraft is not simple and cannot be completed in a short time. Behind every witchcraft involves several or even dozens or hundreds of complex knowledge. Taking a limit-breaking ignition technique as an example, it would take at least half an hour to completely write it down on paper. So exchanging witchcraft often requires finding a suitable place, as well as tools such as paper and pen. In addition to this, the exchange of knowledge between wizards generally falls into 2 forms. One is to directly exchange manuscripts, transcribing complete witchcraft models and principles on paper. The other is based on the exchange of manuscripts, with accompanying explanations, mainly explaining the principles and knowledge behind it, etc. The second method is obviously a better way for both parties in the exchange. Not only can it reduce the time each other spends learning new witchcraft, but it can also verify the authenticity of the manuscript. However, when the knowledge gap between the two is relatively large, the party with relatively higher knowledge will generally be more willing to choose the method of exchanging only manuscripts. For the party with higher knowledge, unless the witchcraft of exchange is completely different from his area of expertise. Otherwise, there is generally no need to explain. You can roughly understand the principle after reading the manuscript. What they exchange is just a new idea that draws parallels. Chapter 15 Explanation. Not long after, Colin and the two came to a stone house. The stone house is about 100 square meters and is a rare 3-story structure. The red-haired teacher led him to a study room on the second floor. The study room is not big, with 2 rows of bookshelves placed along the wall, and a set of brown-red tables and chairs in the middle. Sit down. The red-haired teacher opened the wooden chair and greeted Colin. Okay, instructor. You don't need to be too formal. We are all from the school. Strictly speaking, I am still your senior. The red-haired teacher leaned back in his chair relaxedly and continued. Berkeley Barnett, you can call me Berkeley. Colin Leonard, just call me Colin. Mr. Barnett. Colin responded quickly. Although Berkeley asked him to call him by his first name, it was just a courtesy. He just listened and naturally couldn't take it seriously. In this world, there is no equality for everyone. Strength determines status and status. Then let's get started. Berkeley sat up straight, took out a set of pen and paper from the drawer, and handed it to Colin. You write first, I have to sort out the witchcraft. Okay, Teacher Barnett. Berkeley nodded, stood up and walked towards the bookshelf behind him. Under the bright white light from the bright crystal chandelier above his head, Colin wrote furiously. Different from the quill pen he used every day, what Berkeley handed him was a black pen. The style is not much different from the previous pens. The mirror-polished metal shell shines under the white light. There are pens in this world, Colin knows. In their memory, the original owner could often see pens on the teachers who taught them classes. However, the island's resources are poor and there is no doubt that there are no conditions for producing pens. The technology or living standards on the island are probably only slightly more advanced than those in the Middle Ages in Europe in its previous life. He speculated that these pens should be imported from outside. In other words, it means there is higher technology out there. It is not an easy task to make a pen. Behind it is a series of mature industrial technologies. In the previous life on Earth, pens were not invented and produced until after the Industrial Revolution. After about half an hour, Colin finally wrote down the complete principle and model of the limit-breaking ignition technique on paper, which lasted for more than 10 pages. The handwriting is neat and there are not many alterations. This is mainly due to the physical fitness of his current senior knight and the complete knowledge gained after breaking the limit and ignition surgery. Golden paper breaking limits does not just give results, but conveys to Colin the entire process of theoretical deduction, research, and flash of ideas, and finally, in turn, re-improvement. To a certain extent, a limit-breaking ignition technique was as if he had developed it himself. Therefore, let alone just write a complete principle and model, it is not a problem for him to write a complete research paper from ignition to ignition with good evidence. I have already copied it, Teacher Barnett. Colin handed the manuscript to Berkeley, who was sitting in front of him. Berkeley had sorted out the witchcraft 20 minutes ago. It looks like there should be a backup already. Well, you see which witchcraft you want. Berkeley put down the book, took the manuscript, and handed a blank piece of paper to Colin. Written on the white paper was a brief introduction to the witchcraft he was going to exchange. Colin took the white paper and read it carefully. There are 4 witchcrafts in total, namely, secondary high temperature tolerance, choking, arrow shooting, and fireworks. These 4 are not powerful witchcraft, but they are not common either. Their value is about the same as the ignition after breaking the limit once. Secondary high temperature tolerance, as the name suggests, can bring short-term high temperature tolerance. Secondary high temperature refers to temperatures below 500 degrees. The effect of the choking spell is to force a person to cough and choke. It sounds very useful and can be used to interrupt the wizard from chanting spells and casting spells. But in fact it is not easy to use. On the one hand, it is easily countered by defense. On the other hand, the witchcraft used by wizards in battle is usually instantaneous. There is no need to recite a spell, which naturally means that it cannot be interrupted by the choking technique. The effect of the arrow shooting technique is to shoot a metal arrow at the enemy. It is of average power and requires a metal arrow as a casting material. The advantage is low consumption. As for fireworks, it is the witchcraft used to set off fireworks. After you become proficient, you can release fireworks of various shapes and colors according to your heart. They are usually used to communicate messages. Colin carefully read the white paper back and forth twice. Finally, a decision was made. I choose archery, Teacher Barnett. He interrupted Berkeley, who was concentrating on reading the manuscript, and handed the blank paper back to him. Not a bad choice. Berkeley responded casually, took the white paper, found the arrow shooting technique from the pile of manuscripts next to it, and handed it to Colin. After pondering for a moment, he continued, "You should read the manuscript first. The method of igniting fire is very interesting. After reading it later, I want to hear your understanding." "Okay, teacher." Colin immediately agreed with a smile. Wizards pay attention to equal exchange. Since Berkeley asked him to explain the art of igniting fire, it meant that he would also explain the art of arrow shooting to him in the future. The first-class apprentice's explanation could obviously save him a lot of time in getting started with the art of archery. Berkeley nodded in disbelief, and then continued to read the pyrotechnics manuscript. Colin also took the time and immersed himself in reading the arrow art manuscript. He wanted to verify his suspicion. The reason why he chose the arrow technique was because the prerequisite knowledge column for the arrow technique mainly contained knowledge about electromagnetism. If he guessed correctly, perhaps relying on the ability of the golden paper, he might be able to break through its limits and turn it into an electromagnetic gun. Of course, this is just a hope. If it is really to be improved to the level imagined, a huge amount of limit breaking points must be consumed. Nearly another hour passed. Berkeley put down the manuscript and spoke first. "Leonard, have you finished reading?" "It's over, teacher." Colin breathed a sigh of relief and put down the manuscript. "Sure enough, no witchcraft is simple." "Very good, let me first explain to you the understanding of the arrow art," Berkeley suggested, and then said, "It's not easy to cast here. You come with me." He took the manuscript, stood up and walked towards the door. Colin quickly picked up the arrow art manuscript and followed. The two walked to the stairs, went down 2 floors, and reached the basement. The basement was empty, with only a dozen wooden, stone or iron dolls standing on one side. There are traces of various witchcraft injuries on it. It should be a specially made target, and this should also be a special training ground. Berkeley walked aside and took down a few crossbow arrows. Without any nonsense, he started explaining directly. "I personally am not proficient in electromagnetic witchcraft, so I can only briefly explain it to you." Colin listened with rapt attention. Chapter 16 Enlightenment. Berkeley talked for more than an hour, covering principles, models, and demonstrations. Colin felt that he was a big step closer to successfully performing the arrow shooting technique. "Thank you for your explanation, Teacher Barnett. I have benefited a lot," he said sincerely. Berkeley didn't speak, just smiled. Immediately afterwards, Colin began to explain to him a limit-breaking ignition technique. Quote, "In my opinion, the ignition technique is a variant of the ignition technique. The main difference between it and the ignition technique is that it can ignite fire from a distance. As we all know, witchcraft that can cast spells from a distance usually involves mental mechanics, usually through mental power to assist positioning. But wizard apprentices cannot release their mental power, and it is very difficult to locate them through mental power. The reason why I can accurately cast the fire setting technique in the air is mainly because its positioning method does not rely on mental power, but relies on spatial positioning." Colin talked eloquently that the knowledge involved in a limit-breaking ignition technique is not complicated. Even spatial positioning only involves the knowledge of simple 3-dimensional spatial coordinates. It does not go beyond his identity. It is just a well-conceived idea. So he doesn't need to worry about being too outstanding. Similarly, it took Colin about an hour and a half to finally explain the ignition technique after breaking the limit from beginning to end. After listening to his explanation, Berkeley held the manuscript and fell into deep thought. A few seconds later, accompanied by a burst of magic power, a small orange flame suddenly appeared in front of him. Then the instability dissipated and he shook his head, but still had a smile on his face. He turned to look at Colin. "This witchcraft is very inspiring to me. You can also choose another witchcraft from the previous ones to take away." Colin was stunned and quickly thanked him. Berkeley's principle of equivalent exchange and attitude of equality were beyond his expectation. Quote, "Secondary high temperature tolerance, Teacher Barnett, I choose this." He made a decision after pondering for a moment. You can never have too much defensive wizardry. On the other hand, the limit-breaking potential of secondary high temperature tolerance may be considerable. It's a good choice. Go get it yourself, Leonard. Berkeley nodded and continued to read the pyrotechnics manuscript. This is the end of our deal. Okay, instructor. After getting the manuscript, Colin rushed back to the wizard's stone house without stopping. The journey was smooth with the help of ID badges. The white ball of light released by the limit-breaking light technique in his hand also provided him with sufficient illumination, but it consumed some magic power. By the time he returned to the stone house, more than half of his magic power had been consumed. In the following time, he continued to retreat, and his life was as regular as before. It just reduced the practice of solar breathing and spent more time learning 3 new witchcrafts: steel armor, arrow shooting, and secondary high temperature tolerance. As for the knight's combat skill, brilliant. After he saw the power of the wizard's powerful witchcraft at close range last time, he decided to abandon it. Knight combat skills are always just the power of mortals. Perhaps using gold paper to continuously break limits might reach the level of powerful witchcraft. But if you have such skill, why not just improve your witchcraft? However, you still need to continue practicing solar breathing. The abundant energy it brings can be said to have many benefits. Apart from breaking the limit of the circle meditation method, Colin feels that this is the most cost-effective point to break the limit so far. In addition, getting the arrow shooting technique this time was an unexpected blessing, and it was also the reason why he decided not to practice Kungguang anymore. Although the original owner left behind a copy of General Basic Witchcraft for the apprenticeship. But most of the witchcraft recorded there are actually tricks. For example, there are only 2 powerful witchcrafts, such as ignition, water condensation, and light. One is steel armor, and the other is psychic shock. These are 2 standard sorceries against mortal knights. The former can make oneself seem to be covered with a thick layer of steel armor, and there are no blind spots and no load. The latter is the best witchcraft to deal with mentally weak mortals. Even knights, as long as they are not high knights, do not have special protective witchcraft. The result is not much different from that of ordinary people, they are all unable to fight back. At most, it can only resist the difference between 1 time and 1.5 times. But psychic shock is not that useful for wizards. At the same level, at least 8 attacks are needed to cause fatal damage. This was one of the reasons why he chose to learn knight combat skills in the first place. But now with the arrow shooting technique, the shortcomings of attack have been made up, and naturally there is no need to sacrifice the near for the far. Another 10 days passed. In the meditation room, Colin slowly opened his eyes, breathed out the gold paper, and the pale golden particles gathered. Name: Colin Leonard. Level: Junior Wizard Apprentice, 75 100ths, Senior Knight, 81 100ths. Meditation Method: Apprenticeship Circle Meditation Method I, 15 100ths, Solar Breathing Method I, 35 100ths. Witchcraft: Ignition I, 23 100ths, Water Condensation I, 18 100ths, Light I, 26 100ths, Steel Armor, 2 100ths, Arrow Shooting, 1 100th. Skill: Elementary Witchcraft Crystal Production, Bright Crystal Production I, Up Pointing Arrow, 100 100ths. Breaking Limit Point: 18. The progress after leveling has increased a little, and Colin smiled with satisfaction. Now it only takes 25 days to advance. In addition, he also successfully learned the art of archery yesterday, and he just learned the steel armor that he learned earlier the day before yesterday. He benefited a lot from Berkeley's explanation. Otherwise, even with the gold paper, it would have taken him at least 10 days and a half to get started with archery. As for the secondary high temperature tolerance and psychic shock, we have not yet been able to get started. Although the gold paper allows him to accumulate progress, the progress accumulated by failure is less, and the progress accumulated by success is more. Getting started in witchcraft, especially powerful witchcraft, is not that easy. In addition, the limit breaking points have also accumulated to 18 points. When the limit breaking point reaches 10 o'clock, the bright crystal production I reaches the limit, and the rising symbol behind it is also surrounded by golden outline light. But Colin has no intention of breaking the limit again. On the one hand, the current magic stones are enough. On the other hand, it was because this afternoon, when he went to sell crystals, the owner of the store that purchased the witchcraft crystals clearly told him that after collecting this batch of crystals, he would no longer purchase bright crystals in the near future. As for why, the boss said it was because the market was saturated. Colin half believed this. Witchcraft crystal is indeed not a cheap consumer product. Even the cheapest bright crystal can usually only be afforded by half of the junior wizard apprentices. And the total number of wizards on the island is not that many, so it is possible that the bright crystal market is saturated. He also deliberately left some bright crystals to set up a stall in the market, but he did not sell any of them until dark. The market is indeed not as hot as before. But bright crystal is a consumable after all, and market saturation is only temporary. The boss's attitude of refusing the acquisition was a bit too decisive. Perhaps it touches someone's interests. Single quote. Colin understood, sighed, stood up, walked out of the meditation room, and came to the window facing the sea. The gentle sea breeze blew through his hair, his shoulders, and his cheeks, making him feel calmer inside. All in all, he hasn't played with a mobile phone or been exposed to the internet for a long time. Making luminous crystals, learning new witchcraft, practicing solar breathing techniques, meditating. Every day is full of plans. The only activity that can be regarded as entertainment may be to lean against the window here, enjoy the sea breeze and look at the scenery. Single quote. All of this started out because of the pressure of the 3-month countdown. Single quote. But then, what happened later? Single quote. Colin let out a soft breath. The suppressed cries of a widowed woman holding a baby seemed to be heard in my ears, and the disgusting smell of meat seemed to be lingering on the tip of my nose. The store owner's words of refusing to purchase were still echoing in my mind. And under the moonlit night, Erica's determined expression. He raised his palms, and the moonlight gathered in his open palms like running water. Fingers together, fist, didn't catch any moonlight. But the well-defined muscles of his forearm, the strong feeling when he clenched it, the magic power constantly running in his body, all of these gave him a strong sense of peace of mind. He also gradually understood, if you want to live happily in this world, that power is the only thing he should pursue. Subscribe to Chinese Novel Audiobook YouTube channel. Chapter 17 Invitation. When the moon was at its peak, Colin arranged his future plans and went back to the house to rest. Another week has passed. In the stone house, Colin sat on the edge of the bed, raised his left hand, then held the knight's sword lying aside with his right hand, and tentatively cut his left palm. The metal sword edge passed by the palm of my hand, but it was unscathed. He pressed the tip of the sword against his palm, gradually increasing his strength, and the skin on his palm continued to dent. It wasn't until the strength of an ordinary adult man was added that Colin felt a slight sting. He stopped trying, closed his eyes and felt the life energy in his body that was completely different from the magic power. Just now, he successfully broke through to the Great Night. The life seeds in the body first disintegrate into surging blood, which spontaneously circulates in the body and transforms the body. This process lasted 2 hours. During this period, he not only coughed up a large pool of black and yellow thick phlegm, and defecated a lot of indescribable filth, but he also broke out in stinking sweat mixed with impurities, and shed layers of skin. Then, the surging blood gathered in his chest again. From then on, the blood energy can move at will, and he also has a new ability, blood energy armor. When blood covers the skin, an invisible layer of armor is formed. After several attempts, Colin roughly figured out the strength of the blood armor. It is roughly equivalent to wearing a layer of cowhide armor, which is weaker than the magic steel armor in protecting against physical attacks, but has a certain ability to resist mental attacks. Overall not bad. Of course, what makes him most happy is the increase in lifespan after breaking through. The solar breathing method tends to increase energy, and energy is naturally inseparable from vitality. He speculated that he should be among those who have the most longevity. According to the general age range of 130 to 150 for great knights, he can live to be at least 145 years old now. 145 years is a very long time. For someone with a shorter life, he might have been reincarnated 3 times. Just as Colin was lying on the bed, relaxing and thinking for a while, there was a sudden knock on the door. Who? Colin straightened up and walked to the door and asked. It's me, Charlie. A familiar voice came. Colin was a little surprised. After he refused Charlie's solicitation last time, Charlie said he would come to him again in the future. But in fact, he never saw Charlie again after that. He thought Charlie had given up recruiting him. Colin pondered for a moment and opened the door. Charlie was standing outside with a smile, still flanked by Owen and Haywood. Long time no see, Charlie. What do you want from me? Colin asked calmly. Long time no see, Colin. Charlie greeted with a gentle tone. It's been so long, have you thought about it? Without waiting for Colin to answer, He took the invitation from Owen behind him and continued. Don't be in a hurry to answer me. I know you still have some doubts about the news I told you before. He thrust the invitation into Colin's hand. At 8 o'clock tomorrow night, the remaining people who have not joined the Mutual Aid Club will come. When the time comes, I will provide you with definite evidence to prove what I said. He patted Colin on the shoulder. Wait until you see the evidence and then tell me what you think. After saying that, he left without any hesitation, as if he was going to the next apprentice. The silhouettes of the three people gradually disappeared into the distance. Colin closed the door, looked at the brown invitation in his hand, thought for a moment, shook his head, lit it casually, and threw it into the kitchen stove next to him. Although he was curious about the evidence Charlie mentioned, he would not take the risk. Asterisk. 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 The next evening, inside a residence in Blackstone City, Charlie was sitting in the main seat. He looked towards Owen standing at the door and asked with his eyes. No one is coming. Owen shook his head, frowning on his thin face. Close the door, Charlie ordered expressionlessly. The heavy wooden door creaked shut, and Charlie turned back and glanced at the 5 apprentices in front of him. Where's the evidence you're talking about, Charlie? One of the male apprentices asked first, folding his hands on his chest and speaking impatiently. Charlie invited them here, but he didn't say a word, and he didn't know what kind of medicine he was selling. Charlie did not answer, but stood up and walked to the wall behind him, and respectfully opened a secret door. A middle-aged man wearing a black robe slowly walked out of the shadows. Well done, Charlie, he said calmly, waving his right hand, and an invisible barrier enveloped the entire house. The male apprentice no longer looked impatient at this time, and the questioning voice stopped abruptly. Even a fool can tell something is wrong at this point. How dare you, Charlie? Another female apprentice couldn't help shouting. Another male apprentice decisively started casting spells. The middle-aged wizard chuckled, stopped, and looked at the apprentice who was casting the spell quietly. After a few seconds, a ball of magic power gathered in the hands of the male apprentice, but then suddenly dissipated. Charlie winked. Haywood, who had been waiting next to him for a long time, quickly stepped forward and held down the male apprentice after receiving the signal. The strength of the male apprentice and junior knight was completely helpless under his hands. Stop struggling in vain. It is impossible for you to release witchcraft here. Charlie looked at the other apprentices and reminded lightly. Don't hurt each other's lives. This is the rule of the school. Aren't you afraid of being blamed by the school? Charlie, shouted the male apprentice who was pressed on the brown table. Charlie ignored it, turned around and respectfully took a piece of brown animal skin paper from the middle-aged wizard. He walked towards the male apprentice and whispered expressionlessly. Don't worry, none of you will die, and the school won't find out. The apprentices all turned pale. With their status as the Lap school, they never thought that one day they would encounter danger on the island. Even they will be kicked out of the school in a month. Now, some people on the island dared to challenge the authority of the school. Half an hour later, Then I will go back to the school first, sir. Charlie said respectfully. Haywood, Owen, and the other apprentices were standing behind him silently. Go. The middle-aged wizard calmly ordered. I remember you said there is still an apprentice you haven't finished yet. Although, I don't know why, he didn't come this time and didn't give me a chance to show the evidence. But now all the apprentices except him have joined the Mutual Aid Society. I believe that as long as I invite other apprentices with him, I will definitely succeed in one fell swoop. Quote. After all, joining the mutual aid will benefit him without any harm. He has no reason not to join. Well, you go back, remember not to show off your lies. Also, be prepared. I will help you advance in a week. Yes, sir, Charlie answered respectfully again, a hint of joy flashing in his eyes. Chapter 18. Come to the door. The orange fireball gradually emerged from the water, and the blue water was dyed red, reflected in Colin's eyes. In a daze, he even felt that this was not seawater, but hot molten iron. Colin withdrew his gaze and took the breakfast bowl and his homemade wooden chopsticks to the kitchen. Recently, whenever he had breakfast in the morning, he would lean against the window with food in hand and admire the sunrise in the distance. Although it's the same time and the same location every day, the sunrise scenery keeps changing. The hot water in the iron pot on the kitchen stove is boiling. Every time after cooking on the earthen stove, he would ladle a few ladles of water into it to protect the bottom of the pot from being burned by firewood embers, and to provide him with hot water for washing dishes. There is no dishwashing liquid in this world. If you want to wash the dishes cleanly, you still have to use hot water. Just as Colin was about to scoop out water and wash the dishes, there was a sudden loud knock on the door. He put the wooden ladle aside, wiped his hands on the rag, and went to open the door. The wooden door creaked open, and the three of them were Charlie. Behind them there was a dense circle of apprentices. Jeff, Mia, Carissa, Kate. Colin raised his eyebrows. Are all the apprentices from the same period here? They all joined the Mutual Aid Association. Is the evidence Charlie said true? Single quote. But why are they here now? Could it be that they want me to join the Mutual Aid Association, but am I that important? Single quote. Colin, Charlie, the leader, spoke first, with a sincere and gentle tone. Except for Erica, who went to the dark forest, all of our remaining apprentices at the same time have joined the Mutual Aid Association. I'm here to continue inviting you to join the Mutual Aid Club. Although I don't know why you didn't come yesterday and didn't give me a chance to prove it. Charlie pointed to the apprentices surrounding him and continued. But look, if what I said is false, how could they choose to join the Mutual Aid Association? As a classmate who has lived together for nearly 10 years, I really want to unite everyone, and I really want to help you. We need your power too, Colin. Yes, Colin, join us. The apprentice behind agreed. A trace of wavering flashed across Colin's face. It seems like, what Charlie said is really the truth. Charlie had a winning smile on his face. There's no reason why you shouldn't join, Colin. Single quote. But soon, the smile on his face solidified. Colin still shook his head. Quote. Sorry, Charlie, it's not that I don't want to join, I just don't want to join so soon. There is still 1.5 months until the 3-month deadline, isn't it? Charlie's expression was sincere, and if what he said was true, maybe he was really thinking about him. But he really doesn't need to join the so-called mutual aid group. According to the current progress, it only takes half a month for him to successfully break through to the intermediate wizard apprenticeship. Colin, the sooner you join the mutual aid group, the sooner everyone can accumulate strength. You may not know that I have obtained a group witchcraft. Every additional person can gain 1 point more strength. And practicing witchcraft requires time. Charlie continued to explain. The smile returned to his face. He had anticipated this situation and was prepared. Colin frowned and thought. Charlie stared at Colin quietly, waiting for his answer. Quote. Sorry, Charlie. He pondered for a moment and continued to refuse. I plan to give it another try, maybe I can advance. This was what he said sincerely, but in Charlie's view, it was obviously perfunctory, and he couldn't help but feel angry in his heart. The other students standing behind were also a little angry, and some even said in a strange way. He doesn't look at his talent, and he doesn't look for a reliable excuse. Hey, Colin, you are so selfish. This is obviously good for you and everyone. Charlie frowned and said nothing. He just sighed and shook his head towards Haywood behind him. Haywood grinned ferociously, showing his white teeth. Colin's pupils shrank, and he felt something bad in his heart. Boom. The wooden door that had just been fastened was hit hard and made a violent sound. While using the steel armor, Colin walked towards the wooden cabinet with the bee needles. Adrenaline secreted in his body, making his heart beat slightly faster. He didn't expect that Charlie would fall out at any time. He just refused to join, and didn't he care about the opinions of other apprentices? A few seconds later, white light flashed and an invisible layer of armor enveloped his whole body. At the same time, he also pulled out the bee needle from the scabbard and held it in his hand. Boom! The wooden door shook violently, and the next second it was knocked to the ground. The door panel fell to the ground and dust flew up. Haywood walked in with a grin, his tall and strong body blocking the sunlight that should have shone into the house from the door. He looked at Colin holding the knight's sword in front of him and smiled disdainfully. It can be seen from the way Colin holds the sword that he has not learned any knightly combat skills. If Colin started chanting a spell now, he would still be a little more wary, but now if he wanted to fight him hand to hand, it would be like hitting an egg with an egg against a stone. Even so, he still cautiously drew out the stainless steel sword he had been carrying on his back. Colin's pupils shrank. Although he hadn't made a move yet, the sword in Haywood's hand weighed at least 50 kilograms. From this alone, it can be seen that his knight level must not be low. Before Colin could think about it, Haywood stepped forward suddenly and swiped at Colin with his sword, aiming at Colin's right hand holding the sword. Members of the school are not allowed to kill each other, and Haywood deliberately spared some effort. Clang! The bee sting and the giant sword collided, making a crisp sound. Haywood took half a step back, his expression uncertain, and the giant sword in his hand was dented by a bee sting. Colin stopped where he was, slightly turning his right wrist, feeling slightly relieved. He could see that Haywood was not using his full strength. But judging from the power transmitted, even if Haywood retained a hand, he would only be at the peak of a knight, not a great knight. Otherwise, he would not have been able to block that sword so easily without any combat skills. At this time, Charlie also walked in, and after seeing the result of the fight between the two, his expression changed slightly. With a thought in his mind, an air missile shot towards Colin at high speed. Colin had a sudden thought and wanted to duck to the side. But Haywood on the side seized the opportunity and raised his sword to slap him. In a hurry, Colin had no time to resist, so he had to take an oblique shot. Bang! Colin staggered when he was photographed and bumped into the wall. The knight's breathing technique practiced by Haywood should focus on strength. The force of this slant shot is very fierce. Although he was not injured under the protection of the steel armor and the blood energy of the Great Knight, he looked a little embarrassed. But even more shocked than him was Charlie. Steel armor, and the level of a Great Knight. He looked uncertain. It seems that we underestimated. Before he could finish his words, a blinding white light suddenly erupted. Both he and Haywood temporarily lost their sight and could only retreat quickly. Colin stood up, but instead of chasing after him, he took out his homemade crystal sunglasses from his pocket and put them on. Then a strong white light group floated in front of his chest. Haywood, who had just recovered some eyesight, could not look directly at Colin under the dazzling light, so he could only pull Charlie back quickly. Colin strode towards Haywood. Since the last time he faced the Defiler with a limit-breaking light spell that had miraculous effects, he has often thought about other ways to use it. Now, putting on strong light and wearing sunglasses is a new usage he has figured out. Under the interference of strong light, the enemy could not look directly at him, let alone see his moves clearly. Apparently this works wonders in close combat. Colin held a thin sword and stabbed Charlie in the shoulder. Just as Haywood and others did not dare to hurt his life, he also did not dare to kill him. Phew. The sharp sword tip penetrated into the flesh, but Colin looked surprised. He slowly pulled the bee sting out of Haywood's body. This strong black man actually took the initiative to block Charlie's sword at the critical moment. Chapter 19 Confinement. When did the two of them get on so well? Single quote. Colin looked at the expressionless Haywood, who was covering his right shoulder where he was stabbed, and Charlie, who was protected behind him by his strong body, and couldn't help but feel that he was thinking a little wrong. Charlie obviously didn't know his dirty thoughts. At this time, he finally recovered from the blindness, his expression was slightly angry, and he shouted outside. Owen, bring the others in with you. Colin frowned, and a large number of thoughts flashed through him. Although he was not afraid of being surrounded, it was not easy for him to contend with so many people without learning combat skills when he could not make a fatal blow. It seems we can only avoid the edge for the time being. Single quote. He put away his light spell and retreated towards the window. What's going on? At this moment, a middle-aged man wearing a wizard's robe suddenly walked into the door, and the silver badge on his chest was shining. He should be the second-class apprentice of the wizard's patrol team. Colin paused and opened his mouth to explain the situation. But Charlie was one step ahead of him. He explained to the second-class apprentice of the patrol team first. It's nothing, sir. We are learning from each other. Yeah, the second-class apprentice cast an inquiring look at Colin. Colin was silent for a moment and said categorically, they attacked me for no reason, sir. The second-class apprentice raised his eyebrows. You are so slanderous. At this moment, the thin Owen suddenly walked in from the door. He looked at Colin, and then feigned anger. It was obviously you who stole Charlie's sword. That's why we came to find you, you habitual criminal. A surge of anger surged from Colin's chest, and he said in a deep voice. I bought this sword myself in the city. Sir, I can confront the shop owner. This sword is obviously not ordinary, how can you afford it? Charlie was a prince before he came here, and this sword is obviously the sword he carries with him. Sir, if you don't believe me, ask the apprentices outside. Owen's voice was loud enough to carry through the door. At this time, People outside the door also echoed in cooperation. Yes, sir, we can all testify. When the second-class apprentice of the patrol heard this, he frowned and looked at Colin, with obvious doubts on his face. Colin's heart sank. Have all those apprentices been brainwashed by Charlie? Why are you speaking for him? Single quote. Sir, I can ask the shop owner to do it. He quickly explained. Okay. The middle-aged second-class apprentice frowned and interrupted Colin. I don't care what the reason is, fighting is prohibited in the school, so you can follow me to the solitary room. Sir, they are framed. Okay, you three, the second-class apprentice waved his hand, interrupting Colin again, and then looked at Owen standing at the door, and you, follow me to the solitary room. Charlie's expression changed drastically, and he forced himself to be calm and said, Sir, we are really just learning from each other. Buzz. Translucent ropes suddenly appeared on the four colons, tying them up and sealing Charlie's mouth. I don't like to say it a second time. Now, follow me to the solitary room. As soon as he finished speaking, the translucent rope suddenly disappeared, and the second-class apprentice of the patrol team turned and walked towards the door. Charlie couldn't help but cough a few times, lowering his head with a gloomy expression. Colin didn't feel anything special. He hadn't removed his steel armor yet, and the knight also had his own armor, so the translucent rope didn't really strangle him. He sighed, took off his sunglasses, and followed the footsteps of the second-class apprentice. At this point, confinement is inevitable. The rap school generally does not encourage vicious fights between members. After all, if members of the same force are fighting against each other, how can such a force develop and grow? However, the school did not establish many relevant specific regulations, but only drew a red line that could not harm lives. So the punishment for a specific fight like this usually depends on the patrol member's thoughts. 10 minutes later, Colin and the four came to the confinement room. This is a row of small stone houses to the north of the residential area. 4 people were locked in at intervals. There are no windows in the tightly closed room, only an exhaust hole on one side of the ceiling, and it is not light transmissive. Boom. The iron door closed tightly, and the room instantly fell into darkness. Buzz. Soft white light lit up from Colin's hand. He carried with him several bright crystals made of pure crystal. The lighting time of bright crystals made of pure crystals is much longer than those made of mixed crystals, which can reach about 8 hours, and the number of cycle charging times is also increased to about 30 times. Of course, the price is also more expensive. With the white light, Colin could clearly see the layout of the room. On the left is a wooden bed with only a straw mat on it, which looks relatively clean. To the right of it is a small earthen stove, and there is a toilet at the foot of the bed. Being put in solitary confinement is not a severe punishment. If you insist on it, it is more like practicing hard in a different place. Except that you can't go out and have no windows, it's not much different from home. You also have to cook by yourself. Your belongings will not be confiscated. Colin remembered coming here before, a long time ago when he was in adolescence. At that time, there would inevitably be fights among a group of children. If no serious injuries are caused, the punishment is mostly just confinement. The second-class apprentice told them before leaving that the confinement period would be 10 days. It's not too long, just treat it as a retreat. Anyway, the bright crystal can't be sold recently. Colin jumped up and placed the bright crystal on the rafter. Then he simply cleaned up the house and began to continue studying and practicing according to his usual plan. Asterisk. 10 days flew by. Although every day was fulfilling, Colin still felt a little haggard. He took back the idea that he had thought about before. Although life is indeed the same as before, at most I just can't see the scenery and don't have to sell crystals. But for some reason, he always felt that everything was different. All I can say is, sometimes not being able to go out and not being able to go out seem to be the same state on the surface. But psychologically they are two completely different concepts. But now it's finally the 10th day. He took the bright crystal from the rafters and placed it beside the bed. Then he sat on the edge of the bed, and with a thought in his mind, he breathed out the golden paper. Pale golden particles gathered. Name: Colin Leonard. Level: Junior Wizard Apprentice 95 100ths, Grand Knight 11 100ths. Meditation Method: Apprenticeship Circle Meditation Method I 25 100ths, Solar Breathing Method I 60 100ths. Witchcraft: Ignition I 40 100ths, water condensation I 30 100ths, light I 45 100ths, cleansing, 1 100th, steel armor, 50 100ths, shooting arrow technique, 50 100ths. Skill. Elementary witchcraft crystal production, bright crystal production I up pointing arrow, 100 100ths. Breaking limit point. 18. Colin exhaled slowly. Finally, with 5 days left, the progress of the junior wizard apprentice will reach its limit. I don't know if it's the same as the knight, there will be no bottlenecks and you can advance directly. Single quote. Crunch. At this moment, the wooden door slowly opened, and dazzling sunlight poured in from the outside. Colin couldn't help but narrow his eyes slightly, extinguish the bright crystal and put it away. 10 days are up, you can leave. The second-class apprentice standing at the door said calmly. Although the confinement room is difficult, it can prevent accidents. Colin's heart suddenly moved, but the next second, he looked up and saw the indifferent expression of the second-class apprentice. His heart suddenly felt cold, and he quickly suppressed his unnecessary thoughts. You must know that just advancing is not enough, he also has to report to the central castle. The second-class apprentice in front of me is not easy to talk to. If I miss the time. Yes, my lord, he whispered back. Chapter 20. Be prepared. Walking out of the confinement room, there was blue sky and white clouds outside. The sea breeze gently blew over his face, causing Colin's medium-long golden hair to sway slightly. Call. He moved his shoulders and neck, feeling relaxed. But soon, he suppressed the smile on his face. Charlie and his group from the solitary room on the left have just walked out. Charlie's face was gloomy and a little haggard. He glared at Colin fiercely and didn't say much. He just waved to Haywood and Owen to leave quickly. Looking at the direction, it seems that we are preparing to go down the mountain. Colin stood behind, looking at the retreating figures of the 3 people from a distance, doubts rising in his heart. During the 10 days in the solitary room, he thought more than once in his mind about why Charlie suddenly fell out with him. He kept thinking about Charlie's words in his mind, but he always felt that something was wrong. Although it makes sense in general, there are always some details that cannot be explained, and it can even be said to be full of loopholes. For example, if according to what Charlie said, there are certain forces in the gathering place at the foot of the mountain that will enslave apprentices who have been eliminated by the school, then this must be an extremely secretive matter. How did he know about it? So Colin always felt a little strange. In addition, Charlie's behavior of using violence to get him to join the mutual aid group also contributes to this strange feeling. But in fact, if he wasn't sure about advancing, he really wouldn't need to join the mutual aid association. When Charlie invited him to see the evidence that day, he should have gone to see it too. Even 10 days ago, when Charlie led a group of people over and invited him to join again, he actually believed Charlie's words. After all, so many people testified for him. But he really didn't need to join the mutual aid association, so he had to refuse. But the tone was always gentle. He thought that Charlie might be angry at this rejection, but that was all. After all, Charlie could have waited until 3 months later, when he had lost hope in advancement and had no reason to refuse, and at the same time had personally witnessed the cruelty of the gathering place outside, before recruiting him again. Maybe at that time, he could still wait until he took the initiative to defect, if the situation outside was really as bad as he said. But Charlie suddenly took action forcefully, as if he had to recruit him before the 3-month deadline. In order to practice group witchcraft in advance, one more person will be more helpful. Colin shook his head. Charlie's explanation always felt a bit stiff to him. However, this is none of his business. He walked back toward the stone house, his steps brisk. You can advance in 5 days. No matter what conspiracy Charlie and others have, by then we will be people in 2 different worlds. Single quote. Asterisk. 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 Inside a wooden house in Black Rock City. The 3 of them, Charlie, were kneeling on the ground with their heads down, looking terrified. Sir, I didn't expect that even with so many people testifying, he still didn't want to join us, so I wanted to forcefully bring him to your place, but I didn't expect that the patrol team would actually come. Having said that, Charlie actually figured it out afterwards. The patrol team probably came over to take a look because they saw so many apprentices gathering. But he didn't think there was something wrong with his own method. He could only say that Colin was an arrogant alien who usually had his eyes set above his head and wanted to advance. Now that he has persuaded him like this, he still refuses him. It is really incomprehensible. And he didn't expect Colin to hide such deep strength. It was extremely quiet in the wooden house, you could hear a needle drop, and thin beads of sweat could not help but appear on the foreheads of Charlie and others. A middle-aged man wearing a black witch robe leaned quietly on the recliner. The black hood cast a shadow on his pale face, making his expression unclear. After a long time, he slowly spoke. Do you think he is true or false when he says he can advance? Of course it's false. No one in our group can advance within these 3 months. Charlie replied subconsciously. Then, why doesn't he join you? Charlie's heart sank, and his face gradually turned pale. He had never thought of such a possibility. But if Colin was really sure of successfully advancing, then everything would be explained. The reason why Colin kept rejecting him was that he refused to come when invited to see the evidence, and even invited him with so many people in his arms, but still refused. All because he thought he could advance within 3 months. Charlie's face became increasingly ugly. It's not like things like this have never happened before. There was also an apprentice in the previous batch, who advanced to the intermediate level in exactly 10 years, just enough to stay in the school. How much do you think he can guess? The black-robed wizard continued to ask. Fine beads of sweat gathered into large droplets on Charlie's face and splashed faintly on the floor. The black-robed wizard sighed. Your advancement is on hold for a now, you can go. The black-robed wizard waved his hand, then seemed to think of something again, and continued to give instructions to Charlie. The apprentice from last time. I think her name is Mia, bring her over later. If it was what he thought, the apprentice could continue to stay in the lap school. Then it would be obviously inappropriate and easy for Charlie to advance. He had to come up with a backup plan. I hope he's just overthinking it. It's not that easy to forcefully promote a junior apprentice to an intermediate level. Among this group of students, only Charlie and Mia, whom I brought here last time, can meet the conditions. If Charlie fails, Mia will have to be retrained, and a lot of resources will be spent. Perhaps the best way is to deal with that apprentice. The black-robed wizard couldn't help but think. But this is not easy to do. As long as the student stays in the wizarding territory for the rest of the time, he will be powerless and can only rely on Charlie and others to take action. But according to Charlie's description, the knight's physique coupled with the steel armor, it would be impossible for them to take down the apprentice without causing a big stir. And just in case, he couldn't give Charlie any props to help. In this case, it's better not to worry about that apprentice. Anyway, there are more than 30 apprentices now, which is enough. He couldn't help but rub his frown, raised his head and saw Charlie still standing there, paused and urged. If you have nothing else to do, you can leave, Charlie, go and bring Mia here. Okay, sir. Charlie's lips moved and he hesitated to speak, but in the end he lowered his head and left. On the way back, Charlie's face was expressionless, but his inner thoughts were constantly surging. He had guessed the black-robed wizard's plan, and also realized that the black-robed wizard did not want him to continue to contact Colin to avoid revealing more information. But how could I agree? I will be the only one who stays in the school after advancing to the intermediate level. He roared secretly in his heart. Then he glanced at Haywood and Irving who were following him, their faces showing no emotion. Although these two people completely obeyed his words, their real master was still the black-robed wizard. Thank you for watching. Continue exploring the fascinating world of Chinese novels with us. Hit that subscribe button on Chinese Novel Audiobook to stay updated with our latest stories, and never miss out on a great listen.